Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of you. It is I, Q, once again coming to you live from Mexico, and I am joined by producer and co-host extraordinaire, Chris. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well.
Before we dive into today's episode, yes, we will be joined by none other than Crypto Lark later this afternoon. Before you guys all go and jump to cancel me, just know we will be talking Bitcoin v crypto. You know how we do it on this show. Whenever we have one of these accounts come on and discuss, we hold the line at Bitcoin and we let the conversation develop from there. So don't hold it against us quite yet. Let us at least have the conversation before you cancel me. In the meantime, though, some breaking news this morning out of Switzerland. Lugano, I believe that's how I pronounce the city's name. Oh, yeah, Lugano has introduced legislation to make Bitcoin legal tender. This is huge. This is another step in the direction and the push towards hyper Bitcoinization. While it's not a whole nation state, it is a city. I am not well versed enough in Swiss financial laws. I do understand the Swiss banking system and the integrity that holds those banks up. And I understand, at least to my knowledge, that they operate in a different level than just the Swiss entire financial markets in themselves. So, Chris, I don't know what your initial thoughts or reactions of this news are. I'm excited about it, regardless of it being just a small city in Switzerland.
I mean, we got Samson Mao saying that he's leaving Blockstream to go be, basically a nation state consultant. And now we've got another city in, you think of Swiss banking is kind of a big thing that they're adopting it. He was talking with, I apologize, I don't know if she's a Mexican senator or finance minister, but he was talking to her about we have a lot of work to do. That was publicly and open on Twitter, him tweeting back at her. Saying, we got a lot of work to do, and she's from Mexico. So read into that with whatever you want. But I'm excited for this. This is the game theory playing out. To be honest, Q, I actually want your take. This is happening a lot faster than I thought that this would happen. And I'm being dead serious. I thought this was 4 years away. I thought this is 2030. I did not think this was going to occur.
What specifically? Define what is happening too fast. Is it the adoption of Bitcoin? Is it just the global emergence of the importance of Bitcoin? What is happening faster than your timeline?
Nation states adopting it. I mean, we had a corporation buying it openly in 2020 with MicroStrategy, at least. That wasn't like Grayscale or something like that. And then, El Salvador in 2021. And I didn't think nation states were going to be piling into it this quickly. I don't know. That's just what I thought. It's just happening very fast, and it's cool to see it happen in real time, the game theory aspect of it.
So I've got some good news for you. Unfortunately, there is still not another nation state that has actually fully adopted Bitcoin. So we are technically keeping pace with what your expectations were. I, on a different spectrum, actually anticipated at least one nation state to fully adopt Bitcoin as legal tender or legalize it, whatever that looked like, whatever flavor that country wanted. My expectation was set there. However, I will throw this caveat into the mix where a nation that carries the amount of influence that Russia does on a global stage was not a nation that I had anticipated getting involved in Bitcoin. I had envisioned potentially another South American country or Central American country, another Central American country or a South American country or a country in the Middle East adopting Bitcoin in some capacity before a major player on the global stage. Now, if I kind of take this back a little bit and think about what incentive does Russia have to see Bitcoin succeed, or on the inverse of that, what incentive does Russia have to see the dollar collapse? When you focus on the latter of those two, it kind of makes more sense. You go back, what is it now, 15 years, 14 years roughly, when Saddam Hussein and Vladimir Putin introduced the petro-euro. This has been a long-standing plan of Putin's for decades now. He has wanted to get off this dollar-dominant system. And dude, it could have been Doge. It didn't matter to him. It could have been ETH. Bitcoin's technology is not what excites him. It's nothing to do with, oh, it's decentralized. Like none of that stuff to Putin really matters, in my opinion. This is pure speculation. This is just me interpreting what I understand about this man and his actions. I candidly think he views this as the proper outlet to really destroy the dollar's dominance. I think we're starting to also hear it from American politicians as well. Powell had a lot of very interesting comments, never explicitly saying it, but when he suggested that there could be more than one global reserve currency, he was not talking about the ruble. He was not talking about the euro. He is not talking about a fiat currency. I don't think either of us disagree with that notion that he most likely is talking about Bitcoin and possibly other cryptocurrencies. Whether or not we agree with that, it's just true. We don't have to like it. I don't like the fiat system, but we have it. Like, I don't like Doge, but it exists in our ethos. Like, people operate on it. Ukraine is accepting donations in Doge as well as ETH and Bitcoin. So regardless of what you or I or our communities think about these moves, I think it's warranted for us to understand the global game theory we're witnessing in real time.
Yeah, and I listened to Luke Groman on Preston Pish's podcast that comes out on Wednesdays. Their episode just aired actually just yesterday. And I listened to it, and they were kind of talking about the game theory. And he brought up a really good point. When U.S. invoked sanctions against, was it Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, all those countries, or at least when we went to war right after 9/11, he said that they should not have done that. And he's like, it's like kind of poking the bear in the sense that, you know, Russia and China took notice when we did those sanctions to them. And it allowed them to give them the foresight when Russia wanted to basically take the exit. They knew that they were going to cut off the SWIFT system, or at least Putin had a good idea that that could happen. I think something that he underestimated, and like I said, I haven't talked to Putin, I don't know, but he had a lot of foreign reserves that were in banks outside of Russia, but were in US dollars, that not only getting cut off from the SWIFT system, they were cut off from getting reserves that they rightfully had. So meaning, like, imagine you had, like, you can't operate on the SWIFT system to do clearing, but they weren't expecting to actually get their dollars confiscated. It's kind of like what we saw with the truckers, that, you know, those bank accounts were frozen. I guess they were expecting that there would be easy ways to wire them back into the country, or at least, you know, if they're in their name, they weren't going to get fully confiscated. But that's something that he's kind of seeing play out now. I know he had reduced his reserves to about 50%, whether it was US dollars or euros, since he's cut off from both systems now that he's removed from the SWIFT system. It remains to be seen that he kind of needs China, and in a weird way, China kind of needs him, in the sense that the Chinese have their digital yuan, or at least they're testing it. And China has like the largest demand in the world for oil as well, even more so than the United States, just because of just pure population and how much energy they need. So they're kind of reliant on each other. So he kind of always knew, or I'm assuming him and Xi met to talk about having to clear in either, you know, the digital ruble, the digital yuan, or settling in gold, doing something that he can get gold, his oil to China, and they can get him some type of currency. It remains to be seen what it is, but back and forth, so that way they don't disrupt their supply lines. Europe's kind of in a weird spot. And I think we talked about this yesterday too, where like the countries are like, want to sanction Russia for everything, but unless it comes to oil and gas, we're fine with letting those clear. You know what I mean? And it's just funny to be like, oh, if we don't want to harm our economy, but we want to hurt your economy, but we can't hurt your economy without also harming our economy. So it's kind of like shooting themselves in the foot and thinking they're getting away with it. It's just weird. I don't know if you want to add to that.
There's a lot I want to unpack, so don't let me forget, but I do want to give everyone a quick Middle Eastern perspective, because frankly, I'm so sick of people who do not understand Middle Eastern culture telling me why my culture or why my people reacted a certain way. But the first thing I want to dive into is the fact that OPEC Plus had a meeting yesterday and Russia was involved. Russia was sitting right there at the table, making the plans to not increase oil production for the world. So OPEC Plus decided that, hey, we see that the price of oil is hitting all-time or approaching all-time highs. Let's keep it going. Let's go higher. And everyone also understands fully that should they sanction Russia, prevent their oil or natural gas from coming into are being spread to the rest of the world, sold to the rest of the world, they will unfortunately drive prices even higher. Germany is already dealing with an energy crisis. US gas prices are through the roof. I'm so afraid to go back to California and see actually how much the price of gas looks like. Um, this is a perfect example. I think I'm not going to try to pretend like, oh, this will be over in 6 months, 6 years, whatever. But when the day comes where we look back and this is the dust has settled from all of this period of whatever it may look like, whether it really ends the dust settling being Bitcoin introduced as a global reserve currency, or it ends with Putin no longer in power, or Russia balking and saying, we are sorry, we will take whatever punishments come our way, we do not condone this, whatever that looks like. When that dust settles, we are going to need to take a look, not just at the events of the last that we are witnessing right now, back 3-4 months. We do need to be looking over the last 15 to 20 years, because to your point, you bring up how, their cash reserves in Russia are depleting right now. At the same time, we're seeing an influx in on-chain analytics out of both Ukraine and Russia. I'm no fucking expert. I'm not going to pretend like I know or can see a crystal ball into Russia and their conversations. However, I don't think that their reserves are getting depleted into nothing. I do think, frankly, that they have some of the best computer engineers in the world. They have some of the best aeronautics engineers in the world. They have just some of the best intelligent people in the world to contribute. And I don't think for a second that any of these moves were made without an understanding of, hey, we're going to get sanctioned and the ruble is going to collapse. It's not going to just get hit. It's going to collapse. So what do we do in the event that that happens? How do we set ourselves up? Whether it means they're putting more money in gold, whether it means they're putting more money in Bitcoin, whether they're just holding on to the USD that they've been stockpiling for 20 plus years, they have been, in the way that I like to say, diversifying their assets. They're not all eggs in one basket, and they're going to let that ship, the ruble, crash and burn, because I don't think they care. They genuinely don't. If they did, they would not have been so worried about or gone out of their way to meet with the president of Iran to understand what life under sanctions is like, to know and understand what the economic impacts of sanctions, both for your own currency and what it means to be a trader on a global market looks like. I also want to roll back a little bit on just this broad conversation with the way and approach we had with Afghanistan and Iraq and just the Middle East in general. All global players have played their part in sort of the conflicts that we see out there. And there's always been pushback from the people and the citizens of these countries. There are people who applaud the American and West's efforts to help free them from what they see. And there's also a good vast majority of people who frankly just don't care or understand what America is even doing there. Whether it's because they're not educated about what's going on, whether it's because some of the conflicts going on in their area haven't impacted them until Americans showed up, whatever those reasons are, there's something in Middle Eastern culture in general that's rooted around pride. And a lot of it stems from the fact that the Middle East has been a community and a region that has seen prosperity and growth for millennia. And the people of the Middle East really relish in that history, and they are very proud of that history. I am Iranian. However, I had nothing to do, nor did my people have anything to do with Egypt or the Egyptian growth. We were not really involved when India had their flourishing moments. However, we appreciate and understand the interconnectedness of all of this. At one point, the areas of Egypt and Saudi Arabia were part of Persia. At one point, the areas of Iran currently were once part of the Egyptian empire. It all has traded back and forth with one another. And when you have millennia of history, millennia of culture, to be told by people who have had their culture around for centuries only, hey, you're wrong. You should do it like this. It's not a question of what's right or wrong or what's better or worse. It's, hey, this works for me, my people. What business of yours is it to tell me what to do? And I think that's where a lot of this pushback comes from the Middle East. and this will be a soapbox that I will live on until the day I die. But to tie it now back to Bitcoin, I think it is also vitally important. Just today, I saw an update. I believe the exact number was 52.2 or 54.2% inflation in Turkey year over year now. And that is insane. And I've said repeatedly, Iran has seen the exact number is 92% inflation over a 2-year window of time. And you're seeing these different nations in the Middle East start to feel inflation in dire ways, not scary, not dangerous, dire. To lose half of the value of your dollar, if you will, just using the dollar term as a general term, over the course of a year, that's a scary proposition. It's tough, and at the same time, this is hopefully an opportunity for Bitcoin to really set itself and cement its place on a global stage. It would be incredible to see more of these Middle Eastern countries dealing with inflation adopt a Bitcoin standard. I know, Saifedean, you have been relentless. I hope you are listening in helping to push forward changes in the Middle Eastern financial policies. I look forward to one day discussing these in depth with you. But there's so much work to be done still. And while we are celebrating yet another territory or a city adopting Bitcoin or introducing Bitcoin legislation, these are all steps in the right direction. But I'm going to make a bold claim before we drop some sats into the chat and break for commercial. We are witnessing a gradual pace for the growth of Bitcoin. However, I think it will be more like a Darwinian approach, because that aligns a lot more with exponential growth. And I think that is more in line than a linear growth that we're kind of seeing right now with the nation state adoptions of Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is there's going to be some cataclysmic event, World War III, Russia invading Ukraine. I'm spacing on what exactly Nolan called Canada, but I really love that terminology of a democratic monarchy, I believe was the phrase he used. But watching a democratic monarchy just take away banking access to a select group of citizens simply because they don't agree with what they're saying or what they're doing. So are you saying, anyways, I don't think these are enough. And I think it really will be one more big, really, really big event that shakes the Western world. While the events in Ukraine and Russia are affecting the Western world is finding ways to skirt around the issue without getting involved. Every single Western country would rather avoid World War III than to send troops directly into Ukraine. That's why they're sending money. That's why they're sending supplies. That's why they're sending food. They would much rather avoid conflict and allow the conflict to be held in enemy territory, for lack of a better word, or just Eastern territory. So whatever this cataclysmic event looks like that will lead to a mass global adoption of Bitcoin, it remains to be seen. It could be as simple as Russia turning around and saying Bitcoin is now legal tender. Your move, America. We're going to break to a quick commercial break. We're going to throw some sats in the chat as well, so don't leave anywhere. And then we're going to be joined by Nolan for a new segment of the Breakup. Stick around, guys. Welcome back, gang, and thank you for sticking around through the fun little commercial that we have made for you guys. And I am joined now by Nolan. Nolan, how you doing, buddy?
Today is one of the greatest days ever. I think we're on a path to healing. I think we're on a path to healing. We're going to talk about it today. This show is all about psychology, and today we're going to be learning about the master, Jung. Our good friend Jerome Powell, I think he's a listener to the show, because I think what happened was we threatened the UBI thing yesterday, and simultaneous to this show, when we said, oh, we got this Nuremberg thing, it's going to be a UBI, and then Powell's going to end up in it. Well, simultaneous to that, now that he knows our plan, he mentioned yesterday to the world that it's possible to have more than one reserve currency. Wow. I mean, we're getting work done here. Things are actually happening. And I'm just checking my screen here. And I think that's amazing. And what we're going to talk about today is that's this version of assimilation. And it's a very important psychological concept, and we're going to be talking about it. So what Jerome Powell really just did was start to integrate Bitcoin into the American psyche, believe it or not. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. And the reason I even bring it up in this way is because Marty Bent, who runs a really popular podcast or show or interview, I've been watching it for a long time, it's great. He had a tweet about it, which was, Jerome Powell spoke the unspeakable today and opened the floodgates of a decay in confidence in the US dollar as the global reserve currency. So that's Marty talking about what the chairman of the Federal Reserve said yesterday after watching our show and finding out that we had a prison for him. So it looks like we are going to let him out of the prison right now. And I think we have a job. So there's not the UBI. We're going to bring it up at the end, where I think we can actually help Jerome Powell and America reach full assimilation of Bitcoin into the American psyche. So it's this piece that Marty Bent mentioned when he said, speak the unspeakable. And that reminded me of the Jungian model of the psyche. The Jungian model of the psyche is that we've got an ego and its opposite, the shadow. These are sort of bipolar in a way. And the argument here is that personal evolution, progress, all the reasons why someone goes to therapy are really about bringing all of these pieces of the collective unconscious, the shadow, into harmony with the actual perceived personality of that human being, the ego. So what we see is external objects, the inner world, consciousness, what he calls the collective unconscious, right? The collective unconscious. You'll hear about this a lot if you start going down the rabbit hole of Jung and psychology. And I bring it up in this way because what I see is Bitcoin and America having a very almost harmonious, almost twin core polarity, in that the ego and the shadow almost work off of each other. And by that, I mean the following. So we've got Bitcoin in America here. By that, I mean the following. The father of modern cryptography, Whitfield Diffie, the man who invented public key cryptography, and from which most of the technologies that we use today are derived, in partnership with several others, still does this conference every couple of years called the Cryptographers. And they bring them to Las Vegas. It's a huge conference now. And I actually interviewed Whitfield Diffie once on the subject because of something he said in the 2017 version of the conference. And in this conference, one of these other great cryptographers, Shamir, you hear about Shamir, Israeli fella, invented the Schnorr, parts of the Schnorr signatures that I think anyway, that we talk about a lot. And they were talking on stage. So it was Whitfield Diffie, the creator of public key cryptography, and Rivest, the creator of RSA and Rivest, all that stuff. So they're arguing about Bitcoin. And Rivest said to Whitfield Diffie, well, if these kids can just figure it out, they can either be a global reserve currency or they can be a cypherpunk revolution, but they can't have both. They can't be both. They were talking about Bitcoin and its ascendance in 2017. And Whitfield Diffie said, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on a second. America too has existed between these two dichotomies. America too has, in its entire history, oscillated between revolutionary force and imperial power, and never really had to choose. It can be both. It's always been both. But within revolutionary force and imperial power, you see both the ego, what America wants to be, and the shadow, what America is. And these two themes really are true about America. There's no denying it's a revolutionary force. Everything that comes out of American culture, the American attitude towards things, the irreverence to the past, the genocide of our grandparents' culture, each and every generation without any apologies, we celebrate it. But at the same time, it's hegemonic. American culture is cover fire for so much of the American way of life being imposed on others. And it's a natural aspect of life that the shadow has to be, dealt with. And it's dealt with, according to Jung in his therapy, according to this process called individuation. And it comes with three pieces: encounter, merger, and assimilation. When we see encounter really is just when the shadow personifying everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about themselves. So we see that in American politics all the time, especially in foreign policy, especially in Latin America. The fruits of American imperialism are obvious there, and they can be clearly seen in monetary policy. So at once, America has created the conditions for which Bitcoin can grow in Latin America, simply because this encounter aspect forced America into its imperial role and didn't allow it to be the revolutionary force it believes it is. Or maybe the other way around, the revolutionary assumptions of America didn't really match up with the facts on the ground, the shadow, as it does subconsciously manifesting itself. And merging is really where I think we see ourselves now as a culture in America. And merging, what we see is the shadow can sometimes overwhelm a person's actions, and that's where shock and confusion and disarray can come from. And we can see that today in Ukraine and in Russia. And if you want no better example, you can have a look at the sanctions currently being proposed for India. So it looks like America is willing to sanction India over its inability to sanction Russia in coordination with America. And what does this look like to you? Is this America being a revolutionary force, seeing a power rising, getting through a lot of problems like India it is right now, and saying to them, well, now you've got to behave this way because it's convenient for us and our dollar, right? So sometimes this doesn't really work out. And one way to consider the merge aspect is this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde analogy. And the effect of the confrontation with the shadow produces kind of a dead balance and a standstill that hampers decisions and the ability to think in terms of the stimulation that's around you right now or the inputs that are around you right now. What we see there is what's going on with the war in Ukraine. America's never going to send soldiers there. It's trying its best to send money and weapons and everything, but it's not actually going to sacrifice human bodies. It doesn't really mean what it says about revolutionary force in that aspect. And if you look at where the attention already went yesterday, it was already back on State of the Union. There's other things going on in America. Today it's Kanye West, who we're going to talk about in a minute. So Ukraine is kind of just another story already. And this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde piece of merger is important because the way to understand it is only Dr. Jekyll can merge with Mr. Hyde, the monster. And it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. We're going to get back to this Jekyll piece in a second. So remember that. Remember this Jekyll piece. It's really important. We're going to bring it up again with Powell and Kanye West and the end of World War III, because I found it. I found where it is, or a sign of what it will look like. And now finally you come to assimilation, and that's when you begin to travel up through the healing spirals, straight up. And it's about a struggle to maintain the awareness of the shadow, but not identify with the shadow. And so when we see these two aspects of America, revolutionary force, imperial power, and we wonder, you can see stories, for example, like the following. You see politicians saying, well, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, it's just going to be another poor wealth distribution. Who got in first? It's all the tech people. And so what, they're going to be the rich people now? These coins can be racist. Bitcoin can be racist. It's being used by white supremacists. Well, here's something that came out today from Isaiah Jackson. He mentions a poll that shows that Black Americans are 41% willing to buy Bitcoin or have bought Bitcoin versus 30% for white American males. It's a big change. And what he writes is politicians who oppose Bitcoin and still expect the black vote will have to accept the narrative that the black lack of access is counterproductive. We went from being the least likely to the most likely to invest in Bitcoin in 5 years. Imagine what our community can accomplish in 50 years. Now you wonder why you have this piece of what we call projection. Right? Projection is a huge aspect in merger. In this process of the individuation, when the shadow and the ego are duking it out and you're not trying to admit to parts that are wrong with you, the things in your shadow that you don't want to admit to, it's clinically observable that projection happens, that you accuse others of the very thing you're doing. We see that in elections in America, for example. Now, it turns out the Wisconsin court today mentioned a bunch of stuff about a vote, and you put a word FR in front of it, and then you got to put the rest of it called odd. I can't say it out loud here because this video will likely get censored. So I can't actually say the words of what the Wisconsin court actually found. I can't say them. I'm unable to say the words, but it's FR and it's a bit odd. And it's saying that Zuckerberg did it. It's saying that Zuckerberg, big tech, did some stuff over there. And it's not just a little bit illegal. It was totally illegal, totally illegal. And then you wonder why there's all these calls in Washington, D.C. for voter reform. Why all these calls for voter reform? Was the system perfect before? Did we have it all figured out? And if you look at the narrative going just yesterday in the State of Union from defund the police to no, we meant fund the police. And by the way, everything about the elections is A-okay. They're really good and we don't want to change them, but we do want to change them because electoral reform is the most important thing in America because we don't know. This is projection. I mean, this is absolutely projection. Ukraine, the whole situation in Ukraine, is it projection? Who stole what? The thing that was with the FR and the odd that might have been stolen. What happened there? We don't know. We can't even ask about it. We can't even ask about it. And that part of the process of bringing the shadow into the light is where we're at. And Powell got us started yesterday. Whether or not it's because he listened to the show and heard about the UBI punishment, or because he realized that the truth of the matter is the US dollar is not behaving as the global reserve currency anymore. And it's a bit like that whole world where we mentioned it the other day on the show about Bill Clinton telling the leader of the House at one point that the president is still relevant and the president is still powerful, or that I'm really famous, right? You can say you're really famous, but if you're telling someone you're famous, you're not. And it's a bit of that situation. And now that brings us to Kanye West. And it turns out that Kanye West made a video about the guy from Saturday Night Live that he's had some really beautiful girlfriends, and now he's dating, I guess, Kanye West's ex-wife. And people are shocked because he made a video that shows, now I haven't seen the video, but the frame I'm going to use before I see it, I've seen a piece of it. The frame I'm going to use for the video is this. It's the individuation. I've only seen this part of it. So the video itself, I believe you might have to see the whole thing. I have not, I've seen this one part. What we see here is this facing of the shadow again. What we see is Kanye West saying, look, you've put this guy's face in front of, this guy's image in front of my face every day for the past, I don't know how many weeks with my ex-wife. I don't feel good about it. So to deny the shadow, to deny how you truly feel and not express it as an artist would and share it openly. Do you think Kanye West is actually going to decapitate somebody? Is that a reasonable solution? For him to mention he's going to openly and say, I'm weak, I'm a failure, I'm whatever, this is how I actually feel given this situation, I think is Jungian psychic model aligned. And if it is, what you have to start saying is that if Kanye is willing to go through this individuation process in public, and if we see America itself oscillating between these polarities, just like Bitcoin. Bitcoin can exist in this kind of harmony where the two poles of it are these two things. Bitcoin has an imperial force to it. You can't really argue with it. Bitcoin will, if the world goes this way, the situation is war comes to you. It's not that you choose war, and it's looking more and more like we're there. And so in the same way, if Kanye is willing to undergo this transformation of individuation in public, it's the same process. It's an analogy to what the country itself is going through. Now I'm going to go back to the Dr. Jekyll piece for a second. And I'm going to remind everyone that the Federal Reserve was actually created on Jekyll Island. Weird, right? It was the simulation is telling us again, it was actually created on Jekyll Island in Georgia. And what I think about that, in the same way that in this merger period, only Dr. Jekyll can handle Mr. Hyde. It's not the other way around. Mr. Hyde cannot assimilate Dr. Jekyll. It's the opposite. I don't know if people really know what went on in Jekyll Island historically, but this is an island of deep occult significance. I'm not going to get into occult mysticism here, but it turns out the island itself was used for human sacrifice before any of this stuff happened. Right? That's just a material historic fact. Whether or not the human sacrifice had any relevance to the foundation of the Federal Reserve and it being cooked there, I'm not going to say on this show. But nevertheless, the island itself, Jekyll Island, the creation spot of the Federal Reserve, Bretton Woods and all of that stuff, created the money trust in Georgia on Jekyll Island. For me, we will see the end of World War III when we got Jerome Powell looking for that job. Remember I said he's got to get out of the UBI prison? Here's the thing I'd pay for. I would pay, and I think it's the end of World War III, if we can get Kanye West, candidate for president perhaps, maybe even president by then, having a drink with Jerome Powell on Jekyll Island, talking about Bitcoin. If that ever happens, if we ever see Kanye West, Jerome Powell talking shit on Jekyll Island about their stacks of sats, World War III is over, the world's going to be A-okay, and we've undergone this process of individuation. America and Bitcoin have found harmony between being revolutionary force and imperial power. That's the show for today.
Right now, we're going back and forth in our chat here. Nolan, do you mind just lowering your camera really quickly for me? I mean, I did watch the Kanye video, and I mean, look, I love Kanye. I did support his presidential campaign in 2020. I thought his interview in Joe Rogan, he was very composed, gave some very great answers for how he would handle certain situations. But that video is sus. That's my 2 cents.
I haven't seen it.
It's sus.
And look, I don't know. I honestly haven't seen it. I'm just analyzing this piece and that one aspect. He might have too many immediate problems and personal health issues to be the president of the United States. But I don't care.
I mean, look, we put crazy.
I want to have.
In that office.
They all do. You know, so
you have to.
I don't
there
think
has
Kennedy
to be something wrong enough with you to want to be president at this present moment in time.
Not if it is to recast it entirely. Not if it is to literally. If you know what he should do. Not that I can give him advice. This is Kanye West, right? I mean, I think he knows marketing and all that stuff. But there was a president, Calvin Coolidge, from Vermont, my future home state. And he won the presidency. Do you know how he campaigned? He never left his porch. He just campaigned from his porch. He said, come on, we'll chat about stuff in Vermont. There's a famous story about him where he spoke very little, opposite of Kanye. And there was a very beautiful woman once who was at the White House, and they were making fun of him, the president, who didn't, because he never chatted and everyone was partying. And she goes, and this is the Roaring 20s. He's the president of the Roaring 20s, right? And she goes to him, or just the beginning of it. And she goes to him, I have a bet, Mr. President, that I can't get you to say more than 2 words. And he looks at her and he goes, you lose. He's good. He was good. So if Kanye adopts that approach, like you don't have to go on the hustings, you just say a couple stupid things. You know, Trump already broke the model. You just do the rallies. He'd break the rally model and just do like, you know, come on our show and talk to Powell that way. You know?
I mean, look, Kanye West, you have an open invitation to literally do whatever you would like to do with Bitcoin Magazine.
Yeah, come on.
You want to write for us? You want to just come make fun of me for an hour? You want to come just say fuck you and then run away? Whatever you want to do. You want to do a Twitter Spaces with us? Let's break the internet together, Kanye. You and me. Kanye Q 2024. Nolan, I want to ask you also just a little bit unpacking what Powell said last night, because I know we won't really be talking until Monday with you. How much weight do you give what Powell was saying about there could be more than one global reserve currency?
You can't be half pregnant in the sense that there is only one. It's like the rings of power in Lord of the Rings, or right. They are not worn in a way that can be shared. And I don't think there'll be a period now. We're in this merger phase right here. Like the American psyche is separating money and state. That's what has to happen for it to solve and get balance again. For it to get back to revolutionary force and imperial power and find its stasis post World War II, to find its new equilibrium, it's going to have to merge them or separate them. And part of the separation process looks a bit like multiple global reserve currencies, and a bit what we talked about yesterday. You've got the Axis, you've got the Allies, and you've got the Ables, right? You've got the three parties basically fighting. And the other two are much the same. They're fighting over the same prize. Who can be the imperial power? Who can be, who will have that privilege, let's say. And what Bitcoiners are saying is nobody gets it, right? Nobody gets it. No one gets it. You're all out. You're all out of the game. And so when I hear Powell admitting to what's happening, what he's saying is, in a reduced version of the US economy, a reduced version of the global economy, the US is a pole. And this, if you remember from some of these dystopian books like 1984 or whatever, not that you need to read that book, everybody understands the ideas. The Eurasian continent or whatever was called in that story, it's kind of looking like that, because they're going to go with the commodity-based thing and that kind of currency. So he's admitting the truth. And frankly, his colleague, Bullard, the St. Louis Fed chair guy, admitted this openly years ago at the same show where I interviewed Whitfield Diffie. He admitted it openly to the world. He said, forget it. The era of one currency is already over. And he wasn't saying global reserve yet, but he was saying the monopoly on issuance is over. And there's going to be some knockdown effects from that. And so when I hear him saying that, the thing he's not accounting for is what happens to the psychological space of the demand. What happens to consumption? This is that piece that when we were talking about the spiritual or the soul aspects of Bitcoin and time preference and the consumption habit piece and all of that stuff, he's not accounting for any of that. So he's got to just, have this growth future, because there's no other object. The object of the fiat game is growth. I don't think that's putting words in anyone's mouth. I think the vast majority of people would agree with that. Even the ones who say there's no other way but fiat. Not that I know anyone who actually thinks like that anymore, but there are such people, and we've got to think like them as much as we can.
That makes sense. I love the analogy, but I don't know if I necessarily see it in the same way as you,
Sure.
Where I can see a world where there's almost like a model based off of the euro, where the global reserve currency, in quote, is really a basket of various currencies. And maybe it does incorporate Bitcoin, some fiat, some gold, in a way where if a country is last to the part, like in my head, the US will be the last to adopt Bitcoin, but they will still have some sort of relevance because the dollar will have relevance at a global scale still. How relevant it will be, far from its relevance over the last 50 years. I think they will introduce some sort of a push to say, hey, rather than it just be one thing, because this or that could happen to it, or you could lose your keys. And what happens if you lose all your keys? then all of your money is worthless. Whereas like if it's your Bitcoin and maybe some euro and maybe some gold and hey, let's throw diamond, whatever BS they want to throw in there. I could see a pitch like that, especially if it's one of these main global powers that's last to the dance.
So let me just give you my prediction and see if it drafts onto yours, and we'll see if there's an ability to have some consensus here. What I see happening is you've got America that has tricked out the numbers for so long on what inflation is, on what the value of the dollar is. They never really monitored euro dollar. They induced demand around the world by not allowing energy to be traded and marketed for another currency. So the way I see it go down is you've got a point. I don't know if it's even going to be last. There is going to be, in the same way that World War II clearly started to end on D-Day, there's going to be a B-Day, which is when Bitcoin is added to the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. And then what's there is US dollars. I think turns into what they asked for. If they want to make the consumer price index really about the price of candy bars, that's what they get. That's what they get in the end. They get what they asked for. They get consumption dollars. They get dollars that are used to buy stuff to make sure the entire population is fed, is literate, is capable, has healthcare. So in the same way that I think you're going to have these, they're policy dollars. And I mean police with a Y. I don't mean actual policy as in CY. I mean police with a Y, because they're going to make you do stuff. They're going to say, go here, go there. We want you to fill this place. You got to use this hospital. You got to, and that's the way it's going to be. They're going to make policy decisions, and there's going to be dollars that buy them. In the same way that they'll always make sure that there's a floor for the dollar because you can pay taxes in it, right? There'll be this floor for the dollar. They'll have to redistribute. But the problem is they're not going to be able to keep the income tax the way they've had it all this time. The income tax and the IRS exist simultaneous to the Federal Reserve. They will die together too. They came together, they'll die together. And so we're going to have way more consumption taxes. It's going to be all about incentive modeling and all that kind of behavior, AI modification stuff, right? I mean, that's not going to end. This vaccine passport stuff ain't going anywhere. And tracking your transactions on the blockchain, whatever blockchain, ain't going to stop either, right? They're going to know before you know what you want. And there'll be some who don't participate there, I think. Sovereign individuals, kings, queens, all these types of people, plebs that are kings. But there'll also be people who need it. And we shouldn't shy away from that, because it's not an option for Bitcoiners in a way. If we don't have a solution for everybody, we're not going to win the hearts and minds. And it can't just be the scary, I'm not afraid of the idea of anarcho-capitalism. Some people think it's nihilistic. Some people think that, right? That we want the world to burn. I don't want anyone to burn, and I don't want anyone unhappy. I don't want anyone without dignity either, though, right? And you can see a lot of people that have money and are rich and have zero dignity because they're just consumption machines with empty spaces in their heads. And that's fine, but to me, that's where the dollar ends up. It'll get what it asked for. It wanted to be measured in candy bars and Big Macs. And in the end, the Big Mac was actually the best metric for the dollar ever. There was never a better purchasing power indicator than the Big Mac index around the world for how your dollar could be spent. No kidding. That's not a joke.
No, I know the Big Mac is. I'm very familiar with it.
It's the greatest. So in the end, they get what they asked for. It's just Big Macs, right? It's Big Macs. It's Big Mac money.
I don't disagree with the idea of consumption dollars. I do think we go back to a I don't want to call it a gold standard, but a fiat standard that is truly backed by something that's tangible.
And the policies will be relevant. You're right.
And I genuinely hope, I do not know if they will follow through on this, but the fractional reserve tradition of the banking system that we have now, especially over the last 80 years, is so dangerous. And it creates this inflationary system where you are just creating dollar after dollar after dollar every day. If I go to the bank right now in LA and take out a loan, more dollars are just printed just based on the way our system is
Dude,
designed.
I've told you the stories about actually dealing with the Federal Reserve. They were my banker. You know what I mean? Like, they have a manual. The discount window, that was one of my, projects. Figure out the discount window. What do we have to do? What kind of audits do we need? How do we access that sweet, sweet free cash? And yeah, it's the truth. It's there. It's there.
We sound
They
like crazy
guarantee
conspiracy
10 minutes
theorists.
delivery, minimum 25 mil. No application process. Ring a bell. Ding. Not a joke.
And the scary part is, like, I laugh to try to, like, not cry genuinely because it's that scary and sad.
That's good. Now, we didn't have access to the discount window because there are, as far as counterparty risk goes, they make you go through the ringer to make sure that you're pure blooded like they are, basically,
Right.
that everything is this and that. You paid enough lawyers. You got across the regulatory moat. We can believe you that you're there. So the process of actually accessing the money is not quite as straightforward as I just mentioned. But once you're in the club, that's the process.
No, I 1000% agree with the notion of, like, you have to look and play the part. And that may not necessarily mean anything more than hiring enough or the right attorneys. I'll share this one quick little story and then we can break to a commercial and let Nolan go back to enjoying his lovely day down in some nondescript island country. My dad, when he built the house that we live in now, it's in a very old money community in a suburb of Los Angeles. And, like, I talk old money and I'm saying without saying Caucasian. It took him 3 years to build the house. It took him 6 years to get the plans approved. It took 3 months once he hired an attorney to have the arts jury sign off on the deals and move on. And I still remember when he told me the story in high school. I was like, huh. So they just wanted to know that you can, like, afford an attorney and be a part of this community. He's like, yeah, that's really how it works sometimes.
It's true. I think the anecdote is accurate. I mean, I didn't come from any type of money like that, but weirdly grew up in a small little sliver of Canada. And one of the neat things about Canada is that it is accessible. It's 1/10 the size of the United States. So you can actually, like, get to the prime minister pretty easy. I've met every one of them in my life. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
You Canadians are just too nice.
Well, so we're not, when we go to the ego and the shadow, it's like nice or not nice. It's like, am I a good neighbor or am I a bad neighbor? But it's true though. That is the shadow of Canadians: bad neighbor, good neighbor.
All you plebs in the chats, just remember, just stack sats. It does not matter what the price is today, denominated in whatever fiat you have. Just stack sats. If you got a whole coin, congrats. If you got 10, even better. Does not matter. Stack a little bit every day and you'll be just fine. You bring up a valid point, Chris, that Canadians are genuinely scary individuals when it comes to being on ice. I do not want to mess with any Canadian hockey players. So if I
we'll punch a person out pretty quick. One of the things I've seen that's different in America from the subways and stuff, you take a subway in my city, for example, Montreal, or you take a subway in Toronto versus New York City, and you'll see some, maybe a man is sort of rude to a woman or something and a bit like affronting her or whatever. In America, kind of everyone ignores it, right? In Canada, because of the hockey thing, it doesn't usually end so well for the guy, right? They got we call it Canadian judo. When they grab the shirt and give you the hockey thing, it's called Canadian judo, and it works. It's a really good technique. I've learned it. It works. I was in Russia once and saw a bar door fly open and 2 guys tumble out in a bar fight, and I see the Canadian judo start, and I'm like, that's a Canadian. Yeah.
Hey, that's my fellow Canadian.
I know the fighting style.
I know that form. I know that form. I love that. Unfortunately, the fighting that happens in Los Angeles is pretty much rooted around Dodgers versus what's that team in San Francisco that I can't stand?
Giants.
I'm not even a Dodgers fan. Yeah, but I'm not even a Dodgers fan. But that's how ugly the fighting can get for stupid reasons in Los Angeles. That is a commendable reason to defend someone's honor and right to just breathe air.
And there's a whole etiquette to it, right? You know, I used to get in this argument with Europeans. What kind of a barbaric sport do you have where you can fight on the ice? And I would say, what do you mean barbaric? They fight on the ice. I can go to any arena in the world with a different jersey. I can go with my Montreal jersey into Toronto, win a game, give them all the finger, say, fuck you all losers. They pay so much for the tickets. It's all just a big joke. No one cares because they're fighting on the ice. Do the opposite in Europe. Go to one of these civilized soccer games with the opposite jersey and give everyone the finger when you score. They don't fight on the field, but boy, oh boy, do they fight in the stands. You can't do that. Which one's more civilized? I want to know, you know, the one where the actual paid athletes fight with equipment, or the ones where the fans fight in the grandstands with weapons and people die, you know, people die. Like, they die.
I will say this, and then we will cut to commercial because I know our next guests are here now. If you ever see me at an opposing arena watching a Lakers game and they lose, if you come up to me to talk shit, I will take my anger and frustration out on you. It has happened.
Very fun. Very fun.
Nolan, it is always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much, brother. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then we have a fun little segment for you guys with the Austin Bitcoin Club. What is up, guys? We are back, and I am joined by the guys over at the Austin Bitcoin Club. I will let each of them introduce themselves, and we'll talk a little bit about what they got cooking down in Texas.
What's going on?
Kyle, why don't we start with you, because you were just bouncing on that camera to start.
Yeah. Well, how's it going, man? Thanks for having us. I mean, I might have missed an introduction. I'm not really sure. I just kind of ran in from a late gym session, and I saw some guy counting down with his finger. So why don't you give me a rundown of where we're at in this conversation, and I'll jump in from there.
Totally. We are live on air. And I just
Okay.
wanted you guys to introduce yourselves really quickly.
My name's Kyle, also known as the Bitcoin Bum on Twitter. I'm co-founder of Austin Bitcoin Club and Pleb Lab, and a good friend of Mr. Atwood, who is responsible for the Oshi app. We are getting ready to host the second Bitcoin block party here in Austin, Texas.
Nice. Carl, why don't you go next, man?
Yeah. I do producing for TFTC with Marty and Odell, and also co-founded Pleb Lab, also Bitcoin Club. And my spare time, I like to watch movies.
Nice. Michael, last one's to you.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Atwood. I'm the founder of Oshi and a Pleb Lab in the first cohort at Pleb Lab as well. As Kyle said, we're trying to shake things up here in Austin and get some Bitcoin, a little bit of Bitcoin standard going here. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I want to start a little bit with Pleb Lab, because I know that you guys have a hackathon coming on next weekend as well. Do you guys want to share a little bit about what you guys are going to do with that, what you're looking for? Maybe someone in our audience wants to join in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hackathon is the first that we have done at Pleb Lab. The concept or the theme really is kind of a further development, some of the ideation that happens organically inside of Pleb Lab. So we work with a bunch of really brilliant wizards kind of on a day-to-day basis, as all of these wizards are kind of working together on their own projects. There just happens to be this kind of creation process where they're working on one problem and suddenly they come up with some other solution or some other idea that really could be built out into kind of another project or even another company. And the unfortunate thing is that just not enough talent or space really to build all of those things out. So what we wanted to do was kind of give people the opportunity to not only one, work with some of these really cool wizards, but to kind of take some of their ideas and actually expand upon them and maybe try to work out some of the things that they themselves don't have time to work on. So what we have going on for this hackathon is we have Tony Giorgio, Ben Carmen, and Super Testnet, who will be kind of running the event. They'll be the people that lead the hackathon. Each one of them has presented a handful of really cool ideas that they themselves have come up with that they would like to see built out. And if a team, it is not required, but if a team shows up and does decide to build on one of their ideas, the concept for the hackathon is that they will actually receive personal mentorship from one of those wizards throughout the course of the hack.
That's awesome. And is this the first year you guys are putting this on?
This is the first year, yes. First hackathon we've done, first year for the SatsBuy hackathon. We're really trying to kind of, so we have SatsBuy and then the SatsBuy hackathon. And really what we wanted to do was just create like a new initiative really to highlight the fact that Bitcoin is underrepresented in the tech space and in Austin. South by is a huge event that happens here every year. They didn't have it last year, so we're really excited to have it back this year. And we're really pumped to kind of throw Bitcoin into the mix this year. So
nice. Yeah. I remember my days having to cover South by Southwest. What is it like this year? What kind of Bitcoin exposure is at South by Southwest right now?
Carr, maybe you know the answer to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been covering it too for the past 3 or 4 years, and it's really underrepresented. This year, they actually are attacking it. I looked at a lot of the panels and voted against it and put my comments in there to push them down. But a lot of the stuff that you're seeing out there is like the ESG narrative, Bitcoin's bad for the environment, a lot of that stuff. So it was very important that we created a SatsBuy this year. And it was very important that we are represented fully together in unison for the greater community here in Austin. And it's funny, Kyle, I don't know if you want to share this, but they reached out to us afterwards, after we started this whole initiative with the Bitcoin Block Party and SatsBuy, and now they want to put that stuff in their South by Southwest Interactive. But I don't know if Kyle's got back to him yet.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of kind of craziness going on with the actual South by Festival, and I don't think I have enough information to clearly decide whether or not I feel comfortable sharing some of the back and forth we've had. So we'll just leave it at it was up to the Bitcoin community to really actually come out and represent Bitcoin during South by. So we created a website where any of the Bitcoin kind of space that's going to be doing something in Austin during South by Southwest could go and highlight the event so that it was all in one place. If you are going to be in Austin for South by, you can go to satsxsw.com, and we have kind of an aggregate list of everybody who's doing anything in Bitcoin during the 2-week block of South by Southwest here in Austin.
Love that. I'm a little surprised though to hear that there's such a heavy ESG narrative, especially given the influx of miners coming into Texas. Now I say that not as some sort of like understanding or knowledge of, oh yeah, actually this company, and this company is there, just general sort of sentiment and conversations that we've had with other people. Talk to us. You guys are feet on the ground. How has that influx looked like as members of the Bitcoin community? Do you feel it yet at all, or is it still slowly trickling in, some of these miners from China?
We have a huge mining presence growing here. As far as the unfortunate nature of the ESG narrative, it is something I think we're going to fight even as the influx comes to Austin. Politics is a kind of very divisive by nature of the way it is represented today. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be a long, slow, drawn out battle. It's just going to be proof of work, and it's going to take time. That being said, less surprised that there's kind of a huge ESG push in something like this festival, because this festival really is less intertwined into the system at large and more just a general tech, festivals are kind of liberal. So let's just leave it at that. You know what I mean? It's not super shocking that we're going to hear all of the talking points that the mainstream narrative is presenting to us at kind of a very mainstream festival. If this was South by 20 plus years ago, maybe we'd have better representation in like a cultural phenom. But at this point, it's every bit as mainstream as every other festival out there. So
Yeah, even 10 years ago would have been awesome. But
Yeah, and I mean, what's really interesting is, you know, through Oshi, we're actually starting to have like some of these large mining companies that basically like, you know, establish themselves in certain cities, not just in Texas, but beyond, that are reaching out saying, hey, like, how can we actually get Bitcoin more into the community, as opposed to like, hey, we're here in this massive warehouse and we're mining Bitcoin. Like, how can we actually start empowering local businesses in the community and getting businesses to accept it, getting consumers to want to actually use it and spend it, whether that's through Strike or Cash App or Blue Wallet or Moon or whatever they want. So that's kind of another interesting thing. It's like, it needs to be from the bottom up, not from the top down. There's plenty of things like from the top that can help like spread certain narratives, some of which are good, some of which are not, and so on. But a grassroots community-driven movement, like either one Bitcoin meetup at a time or one person at a time trying to start something positive in the community for Bitcoin, like that's a really strong narrative, and it's definitely, you know, kind of picking up.
So talk to me, Michael, a little bit about what does this growing it from the bottom up look like? Does it involve getting the communities involved with different exchanges, educating them? Like, talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, you know, for me personally, I mean, in terms of like, say, the exchange route, I mean, if people haven't, like, it's never been easier to buy Bitcoin, right? And if people haven't bought it yet, then maybe we need to approach it in a different way. You know, we approach it as, look, like, as a business owner, you can begin to, you know, offer Bitcoin rewards to consumers, right? You don't have to like go out and buy it. You don't have to, you know, as a consumer, you don't have to like directly go to an exchange and necessarily buy it. Like, there's tools you can use to engage in the Bitcoin economy through like the Lightning Network or the Bitcoin network without utilizing the asset. But what it does is it exposes people to kind of the efficiencies or just how empowering it can be at the local level, without saying, hey, you got to go to an exchange, you got to buy Bitcoin, or hey, here's how you get set up, you got to run your BTC Pay server, or you got to like do this, you got to do that. And those are all like fine, but how do we make it as easy as possible to get people to take their first steps into Bitcoin, as opposed to just taking the plunge through like, oh, it's like, you know, the monetary revolution, and businesses are like, oh, hold on, or like, oh, like inflation is terrible. It's like, well, what's inflation? I don't really understand it. Like, you just say, hey man, like, do you want to draw in new customers, the growing user base of Bitcoiners, not only in Austin, but, you know, across the country, you know, whatever city you may be in a really easy way, at very little, if any, risk to you. Utilize the network without necessarily holding the asset. And we've had a lot of really positive feedback from that. And, you know, so whenever I say bottom up, it's like, we got to start with like these little small business owners and the community. You know, like, it's great if like some massive company starts accepting Bitcoin for payments, but this is a distributed network, and that's when it flourishes, the more distributed it is. So if we can increase that one business at a time, that's the way to go, in my opinion.
Or, I mean, just to piggyback off of that, even beyond just the idea of one business at a time, I mean, it sounds so insignificant, but literally just one user at a time. So we went out to dinner, a group of us from Pleb Lab, the other night, and we get to the end of the dinner and we're paying our bills. And I just looked at my waitress and I was like, there's a distinct difference between what I asked and what a lot of people kind of ask. There's this question that so many of us use. It's like, do you accept Bitcoin? And it's always this immediate no, because they don't, right? There's no thought process behind it. It's just like, no, we don't. So I've kind of reframed that for the individual user, where the question I now ask is, do you want Bitcoin or dollars? And this tends to make more of a pause where the individual user has to actually stop and think about the question for a second. And that pause gives you enough time to kind of try and push in there and be like, I'll give you a little bit extra if you are interested in accepting Bitcoin. You can give them a brief rundown about how it's a great savings technology and how easy it is to use. And we can do it in the next 2 minutes and I'll give you 25% more. And she ended up finishing the verification process for Cash App and took Bitcoin right there. I've done the same thing with our coffee shop down in the lobby, right outside of the office. It's like these simple little things, like the more individual users we can get, the more people in general see how easy it is to take advantage of that network, the more they start talking about it with their friends. I know when I did the coffee shop down here right outside the office, I got on the elevator and started going up, and it's like a glass wall. I'm like watching as she goes over with her phone to start showing her coworkers. It's like that little kind of trickle effect. It's like you might only tell one person, you might only get one person, but that one person now tells two more people about Bitcoin and the experience she or he just had, right? And now there's more people talking about this buzz that is Bitcoin. So I think the idea of grassroots up starts from every single individual user, and then small businesses, and then medium-sized businesses. And eventually we'll start having so much going on the ground floor that it will be undeniable that we need somebody to start working from the top. And eventually the two kind of just meet. You'll start getting policies that affect things for the people who already want it because they're already using it.
Yeah, and like I was having a conversation this week in the morning with a meetup from Cincinnati, and they were asking, "Well, Carr, how do you get Bitcoiners if you only have like 6 Bitcoiners in our meetup group?" And I'm like, "You start with Oshi in like the food trucks. Like, you go to there, you onboard them, and guess what? Now they're Bitcoiners. Like you literally get them one by one, and like that's how you form your community." And he was just like, that's a novel idea. Like he hadn't thought about it. And I think these little ideas that we've kind of played around with, like us three and a lot of us in Pleb Lab, we've kind of figured this stuff out. And that's why me and Michael are throwing a little kind of like meetup kind of training workshop on Saturday with a couple other meetups that are going to fly into town. And like, we're going to explain these kind of things that we've learned. And like, hopefully they can take it back with them and they can spread the knowledge of how to create a Bitcoin community in their city or town. And we can ultimately turn the whole country orange, you know? That's the goal.
I love that. I mean, Kyle, to your point, like the idea of individually asking them, but framing it in a way where it's not just like do you want to be paid in Bitcoin, but rather like my go-to is, would you like your tip in Bitcoin or dollars? Like that's been my go-to, and it works really well. The business doesn't need to worry about shit. They're going to get their credit card payment, and the tip can be whatever the server actually would prefer. I am though a little curious to hear about all of your guys' thoughts on this topic. We're talking a lot about sort of the grassroots efforts to grow Bitcoin, but eventually someone from the top has to come down and help pull us up over that last little hump and ledge. We see a lot of politicians now getting involved in the Bitcoin space, getting involved as in they're starting to talk about it. They're starting to say it's important. They're starting to say, hey, I will support legislation. In my opinion, the only lawmaker who has actually put her money where her mouth is Cynthia Lummis. She seems to be one of the few who's actually following through on these promises of Bitcoin. Kind of feels like a lot of these other politicians are giving us the same song and dance they do about everything else. I see you nodding along, Michael. I'm kind of curious. Do we trust them? Do we need to still hold that skepticism that we do with politicians with everything else? And what are we going to do if we have to be skeptical about these people promising us, hey, I believe in Bitcoin, put me in office and I'll push forward the change you want to see?
Yeah. So there's a beautiful, this is game theory, like playing out in real time. Whether they give a shit about Bitcoin or not, they're going to start talking about it. It's going to start becoming politicized. But from my perspective, I don't give a shit. Like I'm over here, I'm just like, hey, like these businesses, they're going to start using it. Consumers are going to start using it. And if we can, again, what Kyle was kind of saying, if we can like kind of rise up, like, and get people using it, then instead of them dictating to us from the top, oh, this is how Bitcoin should be used. Oh, this, the other, like whether or not they truly understand it or not, which most of them probably do we even fully understand it, right? So the last thing we want is to have them rain down like their maybe misconceptions of it onto us. We need to try it in the wild. We need to let people experience it and experiment with it at the local level first. And I'm really hoping that by the time the people at the top start getting much more serious about it, where things are moving, where like they're voting on things that may or may not have terrible unforeseen consequences, at least in the short term, on how Bitcoin will succeed or thrive in the United States and abroad. That's why for me, it's like mission critical to just get people to start using it today, just trying it out. Because once they say this narrative or that narrative, if we have a critical mass, and it doesn't have to be much, but what the intransigent minority, right? Like if they go, wait a second, like, no, like Bitcoin is helping me and it's helping my business and it's helping my consumers, but they're saying it's this, and this, like, hold on. Then hopefully politicians might actually listen to actual producers of value, these small businesses, you know, the supposed backbone of America, instead of just like, you know, word salad about their misconceptions about Bitcoin. And again, some of them say a lot of great things, and I think they really get it. But a lot of them are, you're right, they're just blowing hot air.
I mean, I think it's undeniable that for some period of time, the don't trust, verify is going to have to play itself out in politics. And the unfortunate nature of politics is that the only kind of way you can really verify is through action in policy once they've been voted in. So, I mean, I would say it's important to do due diligence and like pay attention to who you're voting for. A Bitcoin standard policy is better than a no Bitcoin or an anti-Bitcoin standard policy. But again, I come back to, and what Michael just touched on, is the idea that you build out the grassroots movement where there's so much being built and there's so much adoption and innovation down at the local level that it just becomes undeniable that this is what they need to build and push for and really start to understand. And then the other thing that I would say is also something to really consider is that voting, I mean, listen, I think the further you get away from your kind of like local community, the more irrelevant it becomes. I'm a firm believer in the idea that everything is trending towards hyper decentralized and hyper localized. Take care of your own backyard. We focus very heavily on Austin, and I don't really care what's going on elsewhere. It's a lot of crazy stuff and a lot of things to worry about, and I can't really take care of everything beyond what's going on in my own backyard. But I think there's something to be said about in your own backyard. I think it's relevant and important that Bitcoiners consider how powerful they are as individuals and as people. And at some point, we got to move beyond the idea of just voting for the things we want to see. And some of us have to actually have the right mindset and the right drive to go and run. It's like, I'm not going to just sit around and wait for a politician who understands Bitcoiners. I'm just going to understand Bitcoin and then go run for politics and make the changes we need to see.
Yeah, that's something that me, Kyle, and Michael have like in like aces, man. We all understand that, where it's like once you figure out that you can go out into the world and like mold it the way you want and dress it up the way you want, it's addicting as fuck. And so like that's what we all get. Like I don't even care like at this point like how many Bitcoiners we get on the Bitcoin standard in Austin. I just want to go create the shit that I see in the world and make it a better place for society. To me, it's just like, man, Bitcoin's going to win if we keep thinking like that. So it's so much fun.
I love that. I love the optimism, and I do love the approach of let's focus on our backyard and build it out from there. I do want to kind of ask, just, you know, given the state of the world, how much certain events like Canada really pushing for people to understand Bitcoin and the importance of not having a centralized control over your finances. We're now watching donations pour into Ukraine. We're watching Russians try to hide their money in different cryptocurrencies as well. How much of those geopolitical events are you guys paying attention to as far as the work you're trying to focus on in this next iteration or this next chapter of what you guys release?
I mean, me personally, I see it every once in a while beyond what's going on in my own backyard. It's sometimes unavoidable just with like other people that will bring up the conversation. But
Like
I
me.
would say, yeah, like that's right now. But I would say that like probably 98.5% of my mental energy is really focused on the community around me and probably not much further than the kind of city of Austin. Again, maybe the idea of the city state of Austin. So I work with local ranchers out in the hill country. But beyond the kind of larger metropolitan and surrounding areas of Austin, I don't really pay attention. If it somehow does trickle down and start to actually affect what I'm able to do and can do, then I will deal with that in that moment. But I'm a kind of guy that I don't sit around and play out the 100,000 or infinite really hypotheticals that like could play out. Like Russia could do this, Ukraine could do this, Canada could do this, the US government, because of that, this and this could do this, and then what? And it's like, I don't know. I'll deal with that when I get there, but I'm not there. Right now, I have a pretty relaxed regulatory framework in Austin, Texas. We have more and more people who are moving here trying to build on Bitcoin every day. The government seems to be relatively for it. So I'm just going to keep driving forward and try to make sure we continue in that direction versus the opposite. So just wake up and get shit done. I don't know, like Carr said, just wake up and build cool shit and leave it at that. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, and from my perspective, we're getting emails and having people from all over the country, but also all over the world. Like in Canada, they're looking for practical ways to get involved with Bitcoin. For a lot of businesses, it's been a bit of a wake-up call. And at least being able to point them in the right direction. I'm like, well, here are different ways to do it. Here are services you can use. And if you want to do promotions or provide incentives for your customers, then come to us. But we are getting a lot of that. And so the thesis with Oshi too is, again, we have to get people involved so that the wave is coming, the Bitcoin wave is coming. It's unavoidable. You can either ride it or it's going to ride you. And if we can get as many businesses as we possibly can involved, just trying it out, they can be ready whenever the time comes where they have to use it, let's say. Or, like I said, the things in Canada, these businesses are, and everybody there is going, wait a second, what is this thing? And I really wish I had gotten more familiar with this before this happened. I want to make sure that in general, people become more familiar before they have to become familiar. And so people are reaching out. It's very real.
Yeah. And just speaking for myself, I talked to Marty about it, and then Odell and off camera and on camera, and that's where I get all my information from these days. So I know them well enough and trust them well enough that the information that I'm getting is correct. So I really don't spend that much more time thinking about it than when Marty says something or I hear it from TFTC. So it's kind of like the way we kind of talk about it. Me and Kyle kind of talk about it privately, where we kind of see it kind of like we're the new Bitcoiners and we're at the front of the lines, and all these older Bitcoiners are at the back of the lines. And Kyle, how do you see that? Remember, we always talk about that, how we're out there trying to do all the work, the grunt work, and then we have all these elder Bitcoiners telling us where we need to go next. So it's just staying humble. It's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's to try and frame it for myself, it's kind of very similar to my experiences in the military, right? The longer you've been in, the more you've seen, the more kind of actual lived experience you have, the higher rank you tend to be, right? The higher rank you tend to be, the more you kind of pull back and actually just start to show people the path forward. And the new entrants that still haven't come up in that system are the ones that then go out on the front lines and get shit done. And I would say that we're kind of entering an era where there's a handful of new Bitcoiners in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, where this is the new wave of people who have to go out and build upon the foundations from the people who built before us. And I would say that's really where we're at. I've learned a lot from a lot of really brilliant leaders: Francis Poyot, Alex Svetsky, Marty, Odell. These guys have laid a beautiful foundation. But it's also something that the new generation has to keep in mind, is that while they have seen a lot, they built this beautiful foundation. The thing that we're going to build on top of that foundation, some of what we build, we just have to actually go out and learn on our own. And not everything from the era past is going to be applicable to this new era, right? There's going to be changes in the way that we have to go out and sell adoption and teach people about Bitcoin. There's going to be shifts that happen as this moves forward. So I think that touches on what you were trying to get at.
No, totally. We'll flip the conversation back. I do want to kind of ask you guys, maybe walk me through. I'm a business owner. I'm interested in incorporating Oshi. What are the steps that you guys would walk me through and help me in order to not only onboard my business, but B, help me onboard my customers coming in that don't know Bitcoin or don't have Bitcoin?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it, but effectively I walk into businesses and generally I'm like, hey, how about rewarding your customers in Bitcoin whenever they shop and support your business and other local businesses in your area, right? They get pitched to all the time. They have Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub. Everyone's throwing ideas down their throat. Oh, hey, we're going to help you. Blah, blah. It's they come I come in, or you know, an Oshi evangelist, so we call them, like, comes in and they just like pitch this, and oftentimes it like gets their attention. They're like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, like, wouldn't it be cool if you give like a little sliver of Tesla stock to your customer every time they bought a cup of coffee from you? Yeah, that would be cool. Like, well, that's illegal, that's a security, but you could give a little bit of Bitcoin to your customer, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And it's like, yeah, and it's, instead of like paying like, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6% plus, depending on the cost of the item, to like your Visas or MasterCards or all these different financial intermediaries, you can pay a far lower fee, and the difference there, you can give back to your customers in Bitcoin rewards. So for many businesses, again, like, I'm not saying it's like there's 100% success rate here, like whenever you go into pitch a business, right? But it's rather high. If presented in a way where these business owners are like, that's practical, that's economical, it's something that I'm kind of familiar with. Like, we do deals all the time. We do specials all the time. Like, I was talking to a bar in Austin that's rather popular with the Bitcoin community as well yesterday. And I'm like, hey guys, like, Bitcoiners come here. You want to do like some sort of special for them to keep them coming back? You want to give them like $1 in Bitcoin every single time they buy a beer from you? And they were like, yeah. I was like, we already do kind of some sort of special like that. I was like, perfect. How about that? Like, yeah, sounds good. Also, hey, do you want to get like, while we're here, do you want to get like a Bitcoin Lightning POS set up? You know, I gave them a list of a few different companies that provide it. They're like, yeah. And like, just starting that conversation, get your foot in the door with something that makes sense, that isn't like jumping all in. From there, like, we can work the rest out, right? And so that's kind of the general pitch. Attract new customers. Also, as a business, you have the option to actually hold that as Bitcoin, which is what this particular business will be doing. And you know, it's like, how many sales do you expect people to actually pay with Bitcoin, or more importantly, like, pay with Strike, or let's say pay with Cash App? Like, in a year or so, I don't think, as more companies, this is where like the top down thing kind of happens. Like, companies like Cash App, like, having basically in the future, let's say a Strike-like feature where it comes out of your dollar balance on Cash App, and you can zip Lightning payments over, you know, over to this vendor. You don't have to say you're paying with Bitcoin. You can just say you're paying with Cash App. You know, like, people don't know how the internet works, and most people aren't going to know how Bitcoin works either, and that's okay. But it's going to empower these businesses. It's going to provide greater incentives and a greater experience for consumers and businesses alike. And like, that's where I see this going. And businesses are open to it. We just have to get our foot in the door.
Bar and
I
Kyle
think-
are so excited. They clearly know what bar you're talking about. They
Yes, we do.
texted and made plans to go to this bar after we're done on this stream. I can see it in
He
their
waited
eyes.
till I started Lent, because I gave up beer for Lent, so he waited till then. So it's just like,
Yeah,
That's-
2 weeks. 2 weeks TM. 2 weeks TM. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so rude, Michael. How dare you? No, but I think to Michael's point, and to this idea of like onboarding these businesses, I think it circles back again to this idea of your local community, right? Like, everybody has a place they go. Everybody has places they go. Human beings tend to be creatures of habit, right? Like, I would be willing to bet everybody in here has a restaurant they frequent where a handful of people know them by at least face, if not by name. A coffee shop you go to pick up your local brew, like your local grocery store. Like, everybody has these places they frequent all the time, and people that they see there all of the time. These are the places where you start, right? Because you don't have to go out and try and cold call some random ass business. Now, I mean, if you want to be like a hardcore Oshi evangelist, you should do that and just go practice, pitch it to literally everybody you see, earn some stats to get businesses onboarded. But the easiest place to start is just talking to people you already see on a regular basis, shaking their hand and being like, hey man, what do you guys know about Bitcoin? And again, even at a business level, if you're not getting the business owner right from the get-go, going and finding that cashier or that server who can accept Bitcoin as like a tip or whatever, right? Like, once they start experiencing it, now they're talking about it inside that small business. They're talking about it with their friends. Maybe 3 or 4 of them are now taking their tips in Bitcoin. Now the owner hears about it. Now the owner personally reaches out to you to be like, hey, what's going on with this Bitcoin thing? I want to learn more. I really do think it's that simple.
I'm kind of curious, and I present it to all of you, but Michael may be the one who answers it. But I'm kind of curious when you mentioned that there's not 100% success rate. It is high, but there's still some people who are saying no. What are some of these reservations that are coming out?
Sometimes it's, I actually had a call today with a business owner in Austin, and this comes up quite a bit. Some of them are worried about they have staffing concerns as it is. And putting one additional step for their business or their employees, a lot of these employers feel like they're walking on eggshells. And even if we have a Square integration that makes it super easy, but these business owners some of them are very hesitant to introduce anything new into their workflow. The person today, she was great. She shared so much information with me about what she's going through. And it's a very similar story to what a lot of businesses are going through. I can't even get enough staff as it is. I don't want to introduce this new thing. And also it's just a little bit about lack of education about Bitcoin in general, because people do have a reservation generally about Bitcoin. They're Bitcoin, they're intrigued enough to get you in front of them for a conversation. If I can sit down with the owner, there's somewhere between a 70 to 80% chance they're going to say yes. Now it's a matter of actually getting a chance to sit down with the owner, right? So, or just talk with them over the phone, and that's the issue. But most of the issues are POS level things okay, is this a seamless experience? For Square it is, but there's a lot more POS systems out there than Square. And the dollar convertibility typically isn't too big of an issue. A lot of businesses are actually willing to hold the Bitcoin, especially if it's only going to be a small portion of their sales at this time. They look at it, I guess whether they realize it or not, but for us, it's basically I'm just going to put some Bitcoin on my balance sheet on the side and just leave it. There's a lot of that. The other thing could be kind of that friction just to get onboarded. The KYC for these different payment providers and so on is a bit of a pain point. But overall, we have a 5-minute setup process. It takes 5 minutes. That also includes the integration to Square. So, at that point, it's just getting the word out there and reaching the masses with it, which is something we're working on now.
Awesome. And I know you guys are focused a lot on sort of the ground floor, small businesses, local community. I mean, especially in the last couple of years, there's been an influx of businesses now migrating to Texas, some in Austin, some in other cities around the state. Are you guys even looking at, considering, or is it strictly let's focus on our backyard, let's focus on sort of the small individuals first, and then we'll let the big guys buy when they feel like it?
Yeah, right now, me and Kyle, we help out any other meetup in the state of Texas right now. I don't know if that was the question, but
no, I'm talking businesses.
Oh, businesses?
Yeah.
I guess
that's
what
trying
Michael.
to onboard larger businesses in the state of Texas.
I know I've talked with Michael a handful of times. His direction and kind of the thesis for Oshi currently is staying hyperlocal and kind of small to medium-sized chain businesses. I know there's a huge influx of huge businesses moving to Austin. I frequent a handful of kind of tech-oriented and founder-oriented gatherings, just doing business and networking. But beyond just talking about what we're working on in Bitcoin, I don't really spend any time trying to actively go out and orange pill or get any of these giant enterprises on Bitcoin. In my mind, the kind of the energy spent versus the reward is not really, for me, it's not a worthwhile investment of my time. I feel I'd have to spend a lot more time trying to get these guys to understand it versus okay, now they adopt it and what does it do? It's yes, the value proposition of number go up. I guess a giant company with another $1 billion on their balance sheet sounds cool, but I'd much rather have 1 billion new people using it on the ground floor than one company with $1 billion worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So I also kind of spend most of my time just trying to get the everyday user to understand what Bitcoin is and why it's important, and really the value of doing business with Bitcoiners, which I personally see as kind of one of the small challenge, maybe it's bigger than a small challenge, but at least a small challenge that I see is this narrative of like, I'm never getting rid of any of my sats. Like, to build out the circular economy and to actually get the next billion users at the individual level, like, it's going to be on us to go out and meet people and be like, hey guys, know about Bitcoin? Want to learn more about Bitcoin? Let me send you $2 in sats for your tip for my steak dinner. And like, just really actually actively engaging with people around us. Just like speaking on that, when we did the first block party, Carr actually asked me before we threw it, he's like, whiteboard out, what is success for you if we pull this block party off? And one of the things on the whiteboard for what is success is that not only did we just like bombard these businesses with Bitcoin business that night, but I wanted them to understand the power of doing business, not on Bitcoin, but with Bitcoiners. And I think it really did work, because after that block party where we subsidized 50% Bitcoin back all night long on everything that you spent during that block party, we actually had businesses that reached out to Michael and were like, hey, we're going to keep doing 50% off. We understand that we are now going to subsidize that cost ourselves, but like, we so enjoyed working with this seamless integration on this app. We enjoyed doing business with Bitcoiners, and we kind of get the thesis of Bitcoin. Your community was awesome. We want to get more of you down here, more of you doing business on Bitcoin with us, that they were literally still doing 50% sats back. And I think that's important. And I think we're only going to do that by actually turning out and showing not just the value of Bitcoin, the asset or the network, but the value of Bitcoiners like us, the community, that we are actually like a caring, passionate group of people that just want our local communities and businesses to thrive and grow. And we can do that together.
Yeah, Kyle's exactly right. Like, one of the things that he touched on right there is like, literally after the block party, I know Michael experiences, I know I experienced it personally. I had like politicians in my DMs, like Kyle had all these people in their DMs, like local people who were like literally thanking us for what we did. And like, we were looked at as like, oh, wow, these, they're not crazy, or they're not hackers, or they're actually like trying to do good for their community. What's wrong with them? Like, and then sometimes we go out to eat and like, they see all of us praying and they're like, who are these guys like doing this? And they just can't believe that we're like Bitcoiners. They think like, yeah, it's a crazy thing, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, there are some businesses that actually understand the concept too of like, hey, I get this. Like, so if I do a 20% like Bitcoin rewards or 20% off whenever people pay with Bitcoin, like, do I expect as a business owner that the price of Bitcoin is going to go up more than 20% in the next year or two? Right. And that's a speculative play. Like, I don't have, I think it's going to go up forever, but these business owners also they're like, okay, wait, so like, it's effectively, if I'm able to hold this, like say X% of my sales in Bitcoin, if that's possible for me as a business, I can give a 20% discount. And in a year, that's going to be effectively a free discount. They're starting like some, few and far between right now. But again, like, that's kind of like an awakening where they're like, wait a second, like I can use this to actually like supercharge my business. And leverage like the same things that major corporations are using, like, oh, we're just going to do like 5% on our balance sheet, and so that's pretty powerful. And in terms of like what Kyle said, I mean, it's like the Bitcoin community is a passionate bunch. What Carl was saying as well, like very passionate bunch of people, and they are already talking to local businesses and talking to anyone who will listen about Bitcoin, right? Like for free. And so I'm the crazy one that's like, okay, wait, I want to like try to scale this up and give people a tool to approach businesses in their community on their own time with an actual incentive. So like spreading orange pills and earning sats for doing it kind of thing, right? And so like in Miami, for example, us in conjunction with IBEX, we're giving up to $50 for every business that onboards before the conference. Like, so if you give us a good lead, we sign them up, you get $50 in sats, like straight up. And then so like we're paying people to start this conversation, and like introduce Bitcoin to the community, like whether it be during conference time or beyond, and whether it be in Miami or elsewhere. Like I started in Redding, California. I had a meetup of like 3 to 5 people a week on a good day, right? And And we introduced this Bitcoin rewards thing with the help of Bitrefill and Fold, kind of like help sponsor this little event. And we had 150 people show up. 3 to 5 people to 150 people, most of whom knew nothing about Bitcoin, but they were literally buying beer with Bitcoin, receiving Bitcoin rewards. And, you know, what Carl was saying, and like, you know, this Saturday, you know, he's having an event with other Bitcoin meetup leaders like across the country, right? And like the ability to spread this and show people like this is possible. You can run a successful meetup. We just have to do it in a different way. It doesn't matter how big or small your city is. And that's how this thing really kicks off.
I'm gonna double down on having Kyle really not enjoy my questions and ask Kyle specifically. I am one of those people, I don't love spending sats. I'll do it on a very rare occasions and I do it begrudgingly. I will send it to a friend and then literally turn around and go rebuy the sats I just sent them. If I ever do spend it, convince me why I need to right now, when I know damn well that those sats and its value is going to be astronomically higher in 5 and 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great question. And I understand the thesis of number go up technology, right? But I've kind of come to the belief personally that the idea of number go up is more than just number go up in like dollar denominated terms, right? The value proposition is that 1 equals 1. We all understand that. That's why we're Bitcoiners. The real power of number go up technology is not just how much it goes up in dollar denominated terms. It's number go up in users. It's number go up and how many people are participating in this network with us, right? So look, I get the value proposition of holding on to almost all of your Bitcoin, but there's in fiat, there's a savings and a checking account. We use our checking account. We use little bits of cash in our wallet to go out and spend. And we, at least we're supposed to, in theory, put most of the money into savings. Well, Bitcoin is a savings technology, and it's a great savings technology. I have 99.8857% of my Bitcoin in cold storage that I'll never, ever touch again. But I interact with my peers and I interact with my local community, and I can do all of that without ever really touching my savings. And I can continue to add to my savings as time goes on, as I get fiat or as I earn more Bitcoin in my checking account than I need, and I put it over into cold storage. But I keep just enough to be able to go out and keep, like, what is it to spend $10 in Bitcoin, but to show one person that Bitcoin works and how easy it is. And then they go and talk about it with 5 of their friends. Like, the value proposition for all of the money I have in my savings account goes up as number go up individual users goes up. So if I actually want the best value proposition for my savings account value going up, we do that through getting more and more and more users to understand how valuable holding that money in savings is. But we're not going to do that if all of us are just like, mine, you get none. And like, we'd never go out and use it. So put a couple dollars in a checking account, in a wallet, go out and spend it in your community. I have nothing against keeping almost all of it in savings. That's absolutely what all of us should do. But we can go out and spend $10 a day, $10 a week, whatever. Just like, that's going to drive up the cost of everything I have in my savings.
And furthermore, I mean, don't spend your own sats, spend Jack Maller's sats from Strike. You know, like, there's going to be other companies that also, you know, have similar features, right? And so, I mean, that's inevitable. Cash App, I'm sure, will do it, you know, soon enough, right? So as that goes on, it's not even about necessarily spending Bitcoin. It's about utilizing that network, and, you know, spend Cash App's Bitcoin, spend Strike's Bitcoin. You're just seeing dollars, you know, come out of your checking account, right? And like I said, I mean, yeah, I think that's
if you have one
go.
of those. I mean, if you still have a checking account, yeah, if you're still using a checking account, then that option's great. If you're 100% in Bitcoin, then have a Bitcoin checking account and have that for simple spending here and there. I mean, if you're 100% in, you have to spend money on things anyway. So it's like, you can stay in fiat and you can spend the fiat, but why spend the fiat? Spending fiat's not going to help onboard another new Bitcoin user. And if we don't get more Bitcoin users, then the money I have in my Bitcoin savings account takes longer and longer to go up in value. So I would argue there's a strong need for us taking that couple of Bitcoin dollars and going out and sharing the experience with our friends and family and our community.
Kyle,
Yeah, and like
really
go
quickly, I do want to highlight something that you just said. Not only if you have taken yourself off of the banking system, but if you were just never accepted into it as well. I think that's
Sure.
an instrumental piece that Cash App has offered and opened that door. Sorry to cut you off, Michael. I just wanted to add that point.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, again, it's like, think about people in developing countries all over the world that now effectively have access to e-commerce, one could say, because they have basically, they're able to use the Visa MasterCard network of Bitcoin in a way, right? They've never been able to accept card payments. They don't have a bank account. They've never been able to use their card, right? Which is why it's so empowering for people. But furthermore, I mean, every single transaction at the local level is typically done by debit or credit card now. For thousands of years, it was effectively like a cash-based peer-to-peer type of economy. But we introduced a middleman and like the rise of the e-commerce world, and a little before that too, in the form of financial intermediaries, payment processing fees, and so on to use that. But now we have Bitcoin. Bitcoin using Lightning does it near instant and near free. So why do we need, I mean, currently, of course, we need two parallel systems. But if one by one, people can start realizing that every single time you swipe that card at your local coffee shop, Visa, MasterCard, whoever is getting a cut out of that your local economy is really never going to see again, just for the privilege of sending financial ones and zeros over the internet. Bitcoin does that instantly and you're free now. So why do we need that again? So I'm not like shitting on Visa or MasterCard. Like that was a very mutualistic, like symbiotic
you can shit on
relationship.
Visa and MasterCard here. This
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
show
yeah.
where we shit on Visa and MasterCard.
I agree. I'm all for shitting on Visa and MasterCard.
Right. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, the reality is for the longest time, that was a very like mutualistic, beneficial relationship for vendors. Like it did increase efficiencies. It also introduced fraud and chargebacks, unfortunately, but it did help people interface in the economy in a more seamless manner, whether online or in person. But again, we have a better solution now. So now that's more of that. It's not synergistic or mutualistic anymore. It's like parasitic. And I want slowly but surely everybody to understand. I want Visa to understand this. I'm sure they already do. Now, every single time you swipe your card, like you're siphoning wealth out of your local community that could instead be given back to you in the form of Bitcoin rewards, or just stay in the pocket of your business, people who are actually providing value in your community. Like it doesn't need to go back to Wall Street. It can stay in Main Street. Like, local spending generates community wealth, and Bitcoin helps protect the wealth that communities create. And people need to understand that.
I'm going to be a little invasive. And if I am, Kyle, just tell me to fuck off. But I'm kind of gathering from this conversation that part of your guys' pitch is you're convincing these businesses, hey, that credit card fee that you have to pay to Visa, MasterCard, or whoever else, that goes away if you're using the Lightning Network. In this event where as you start to convince more people, hey, let's start transacting our sats, let's start spending, even if it's just $5 a week, let's start circulating a little bit more. All of a sudden, the transaction total on the Lightning Network can eventually surpass the total transactions on Visa and MasterCard. And you further validate not only your business, Bitcoin, and the Lightning Network at large. Am I essentially following?
Yeah. Be the change you want to see in the world. Exactly.
100%.
Love that.
Yeah.
I want to talk really quickly before we wrap up here with you guys. I know you guys have a lot cooking down in Austin. We talked a little bit about it. You guys mentioned at the very beginning, the block party you guys actually have coming up, I believe, next weekend. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what you guys have cooking up there?
Yeah, is that next weekend already? Yeah, so we've got SatsBuy starts on the 10th. It runs through the 20th and congruent with South by Southwest. I don't know exactly what all kind of events are going on, but we obviously have Austin Bitcoin Club is tonight. We'll have BitDevs in 2 weeks on the third Thursday. We have our weekly Bitcoiner coffees and dinners. The SatsBuy Hackathon is the 12th and 13th. And the evening of the 12th is the Oshi block party #2. We're taking over Barton Springs. So we're definitely, I don't know if people thought we were going to stop at Rainy Street, but we're just getting started. So here comes Bitcoin Springs. We're going to rename the whole city. Just welcome to Bitcoin City, man. So listen, people have told me for a while now that the El Salvador city would be the first Bitcoin city. Good luck, man. You have to beat us to the punch because I intend to make Austin the first Bitcoin city. So they've challenge accepted. Come on, El Salvador, let's go.
You heard it, Bukele. You now have a challenger in Austin ready to go brick for brick with you to build out his city.
Yes, piece by piece.
Block by block.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I love that. I want to also ask, will I be seeing any of you guys in Miami in a month?
All of us.
Love that. Love that. What are you guys
Absolutely.
most excited for this year's conference?
I personally, I'm excited for the same thing I was excited for last year. And honestly, well, that's actually not true. I'm excited for what I actually discovered was the real value of the conference last year. I went excited to try and meet people in the industry and like try and find myself a job. Obviously, things went in a slightly different direction. But what I found when I went to the conference last year was that the real value is the fact that like all of the speakers and presenters and the Bitcoiners in the community that are like that, you know, I see on YouTube every day and I work alongside now. It's great, but I've heard a lot of what they have to say. The real value is how many plebs show up and congregate in this space that are doing cool shit I've never heard about, man. I met so many cool Bitcoiners last year that are now still to this day great friends. They come in for our meetups. They're just great people. And like, there's so many people in the Bitcoin space that are building really cool shit that you don't hear about on YouTube and you don't hear about in Twitter spaces. They're just quietly in the background, just building out the next thing that's going to be an awesome Bitcoin project. And I love being boots on the ground, just surrounded by these cool people who are building cool shit and getting out there and meeting new Bitcoiners. So I'm really excited to get to Miami and just hang out with the thousands and thousands of Bitcoin plebs who are going to take over Miami once again.
Love that. I mean, look, I was in the same shoes as you. I was also at Bitcoin 21, just trying to find a job. And here we are, dude, both working at Bitcoin companies and doing our thing to orange pill as many people as we can. Love seeing things come full circle. And if you guys watching have not yet bought your tickets, at a certain point, I'm going to have to disavow you. At a certain point, I'm just going to have to say like, what the fuck, man? Use code YTMAG, get 10% off. Or if you want to actually, if what Kyle has said really stuck with you, get 33% off if you actually buy your conference tickets with Bitcoin. So the choice is yours, guys. You heard it here for it. You guys heard it here. Any last remarks before we wrap up, guys?
Yeah, I mean, so we're working on doing a block party in Miami as well. So, you know, we're trying to get as many businesses set up and ready to go in Miami to, again, just like paint the city orange. Like there's a pay in Bitcoin discount, you know, like businesses are going to get exposed to it. We're trying to work out a way to get a block party down there. So just stay tuned. I'm just excited for more consumers and more businesses to have a great experience with Bitcoin. It's a really great, you know, way to do that. No better time.
Yeah, and I would say go ahead, Carl.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and thank you guys for everything you do at Bitcoin Magazine. You guys just been fucking killing it. And honestly, I can't wait for the conference. And then the other thing is the magazine. If anybody's listening out there, go to freaking Barnes and Noble and buy that magazine. It's a work of art. It really is. It's beautiful. It's like
I'll do you one better.
So good. It's so good.
Use the same code that you're going to use to get 10% off of your ticket to get 21% off for the magazine subscription on bitcoinmagazine.com. So code YTMAG means a lot. It's a valuable code, 5 letters. It's not a 12-word seed phrase. It's not a 24-word. It's just 5 letters, YTMAG.
Awesome.
And also just want to highlight that we at Bitcoin Magazine will be announcing in the next couple of weeks a couple of satellite events as well. So even if for whatever reason you want to just be in Miami, be around the circus that is the Bitcoin conference, there'll be plenty going on. I remember last year we were told that there were 50,000 people that came into Miami for that weekend. There were not 50,000 people at the conference. It might have felt like it, but I can tell you for certainty there was not that many people. So feel free to come join the party. Come party with these guys at the block party they put together. And as always, if you find me at the conference, I'll roll up a joint and we can smoke one there. All right, guys, I'm going to go pee really quickly and we're going to go to a quick commercial break. But when we're back, we're going to be joined by Crypto Lark and we're going to talk Bitcoin versus crypto. Stick around.
Thanks for your time, guys.
worth it, but honestly, the workout there was not. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have relieved myself and we are now joined by our main event. Lark, how are you doing? Good morning. Thank you for joining us all the way from New Zealand, my friend.
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
I've been looking forward to this conversation since we first started potentially talking about having you on, and I'm going to start off right away. What is the difference in your mind between Bitcoin and crypto?
Bitcoin and crypto is an interesting conversation because really what we talk about Bitcoin being the inception of this entire wild experiment that has since just morphed into everything you can imagine is now happening in crypto. The new use cases coming out basically daily. But in the background of all the insanity of the new startups, the new blockchains, the NFTs, all the craziness going on, you just have Bitcoin. And it's just there every 10 minutes, tick, 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 putting out blocks, continuing being basically the best censorship resistant money in the world. And obviously at a time like now, it's really showing why it is so important. You know, I was just thinking actually in the shower, as I was thinking about our conversation here, I was thinking, you know, it's so funny what you see happening right now, like in Eastern Europe, people are not turning to altcoin number 500 on the coin market cap list when they're looking to get money out of a country or escape capital controls. They go to Bitcoin. And that says a lot about what you need to know about the difference between Bitcoin and altcoins, right?
No, I mean, to your point too, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts. We see Ukraine, like that tweet that they sent out with their Bitcoin address, as well as an Ethereum address, is a historic moment in just global financial history. Like we will always look back, and I can see a world where my kids will read a textbook with that tweet as an image and discussing what it really meant and what events it triggered. However, now we've seen them now start accepting Dogecoin. And for a moment, they rug pulled on the idea of accepting NFTs. At what point does that line start to become a little hazy? And now we start to have to ask ourselves, okay, what's going on here, guys? You're a little too disorganized.
I think for a situation like the Ukrainian government raising funds to basically crowdfund their, one, the humanitarian effort reliefs, but also B, the ongoing defense of the country. It's a very, very interesting conversation because obviously it is an incredibly historical moment. I mean, if you told me last year that, Ukraine was going to be crowdfunding their defense using crypto, I would have said you're crazy. Well, I guess anything's possible in crypto, right? But it's certainly
anything's possible since
event.
2020.
Absolutely. Sorry. But I think that one of the interesting things about it is you have to understand they're willing to take money from basically anywhere, right? Any help that anybody can provide. So when it comes to, accepting Dogecoin or anything else, is basically, if you got it, give it to us. We're going to convert it and, use it to do that. And look, in terms of, a country fundraising, it makes sense to actually take as many coins as possible. Because you had, for example, I think it was Gavin Wood, the founder of Polkadot. He came in and said, well, if you guys accept Polkadot, I'm going to, donate $5 million. And he did, to his credit. But he didn't want to sell the Polkadot first and then donate because he'd be hit with a massive tax burden, right? So that ability to directly donate is important in a wide variety of currencies. So it is important to see that. Now, there's a big difference, of course, between a nation state crowdfunding versus your average citizen turning to how can they store their wealth? How can they get their wealth abroad, right? Big difference in those two conversations.
Let's dive into that. Let's sort of dissect, because we're also at the same time as watching nation states crowdfund. We saw this morning a city out of Switzerland now turning Bitcoin into legal tender. El Salvador famously did the same thing last year. We've seen rumblings out of Russia for the weeks leading up to this Ukraine invasion, where, like, obviously it is very instrumentally important for individuals to have access to their funds. I think that is the core purpose as to why Bitcoin was created, so that what money you make stays there. No one can take it from you. No one can manipulate it. No one can fuck with your money. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about sort of how these nation states behaviors is impacting the global Bitcoin, and I'll allow this word, the global crypto market versus individuals putting their wealth. We've seen an influx as well on-chain analytics for Bitcoin in both Ukraine and Russia.
Now, there's some very interesting things we've seen happening over the last few years. This is a common theme that we touch on my channel, and that is the collapse of fiat currencies. And of course, everything that comes along with that, you know, it's the massive inflation, it's the government capital controls that are coming in. And look, these are some of the exact things that we're seeing happening in Russia right now. You have to remember, everyone is very quick to paint every Russian citizen as the villain of the story here, but the reality is it's incredibly complicated, obviously, and most average Russians are not on board with what's going on, and a lot of those young tech-savvy people are looking for ways to get funds out of the country, at least to store their wealth, not in the ruble. The ruble has gone down 40% in a week versus the US dollar just hit a new all-time high versus Bitcoin. And it's only going to keep collapsing as long as this conflict continues. We could be looking at some very serious economic consequences for the entire country of Russia with, you know, all the sanctions on import-export stuff, the airlines potentially looking to collapse. We can see millions of people losing their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So what has the government done in response to all of this? They've put in very severe capital controls. Now, I think it was announced yesterday that any transaction changing rubles into dollars or euros, hard currency, is going to attract a 30% tax, which is insanity. They've also put in capital controls on being able to send money overseas as well. So if you're a Russian citizen, all of a sudden your options have just narrowed up a lot. If you didn't have dollars or euros or whatever, you know, sitting under your bed, then you're in a pretty big predicament right now, because the government just made it nearly impossible for you to get money abroad. Imagine you're supporting your kids, they're studying in London or something like that, and that doesn't have to be an oligarch, right? There's lots of, you know, well-to-do middle-class families in Russia whose kids study abroad. That's a normal thing that everybody in the world does. And now it's really hard to send your kid money because your whole country was just cut off the SWIFT network. Their bank card may not work anymore. You can't send them money. If you want to get cash, you're getting hit with big fees. So here comes Bitcoin, the shining light in the darkness of all this insanity. There is Bitcoin waiting for these people. All they need to do is get it, access it, and send it, of course, across. And it gets around all these capital controls. And this is not a new story, unfortunately. We're talking about Russia today, but I've covered the exact same thing happening in Lebanon, in Nigeria, in Turkey, in Argentina. So many countries, fiats have gone to crap. And look, every single fiat currency is on a road to zero. Or, okay, maybe not zero, maybe it's minus 99.9999%, but almost zero, right? Whereas look at the history of every single fiat currency versus Bitcoin over time. Bitcoin just keeps going up. Fiat currencies just keep going down the drain. And look, some of them do it more spectacularly than others. You know, the dollar is a slow bleed, 7.5% inflation. It's pretty dramatic, actually, but not as dramatic as what we see happening in some other countries where we just see critical fiat failure.
To your point, I believe the numbers that we saw were year over year in Turkey, it's over 52% inflation. My homeland of Iran over the last 2 years is seeing 92% inflation. God help the people down in South America dealing with it. But Argentina, Venezuela, the list goes on. And I go back and forth. Is it corruption? Is it the wrong people in charge? Or is it just this system was always doomed to fail? Historically speaking, we've seen us go from a gold-backed fiat currency to then going off of a just purely fiat system. That collapsing on a typical scale has actually been 50 years time, which is right around the time span we're at now. And then you reverse back to this. So how do we break this mold, or are we just going to re-enter a similar system?
I think we are breaking the mold as we speak right now, and it's a slow process. But the thing we have to realize about fiat currency failure is it's not the seeing, you know, the basket cases, Nigeria and Argentina and Russia and Turkey. They're not the exception. This is what people need to understand. Those countries aren't the exception. They're the rule. They're the rule. The exception is the currencies that haven't completely freaking collapsed yet. Those are the ones that are like, how did that not happen, right? And sometimes you'll see good government policies that try to shore it up and actually have something backing it, et cetera, but that's rarer and rarer these days. Almost every fiat currency is on the exact same trajectory downwards. So how do we create a new system out of this? We are creating it. It is being created. And I think we've seen an unimaginable level of adoption happen in just the last year. I've been blown away beyond belief at what has been happening. Ukraine's crowdfunding, the defense of their country using Bitcoin and a wide range of cryptocurrencies. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender. You'll notice they didn't make other cryptocurrencies. They didn't do Dogecoin, right? They went Bitcoin because of the security of the network, obviously. We see lots of other countries looking to pass Bitcoin and crypto, a lot more broadly, often legislations. But we continue to see this new system being built by the very basket case countries often that have been suffering so hard from fiat failure. Sometimes they're forced into it, like Iran, for example, was forced into Bitcoin because of the international sanctions regime. And they haven't adopted crypto in a massive way yet, but they have done it. Venezuela, same thing. They were forced into it, and it was there for them because Bitcoin, unlike dollars, unlike banks, unlike anything existing in the current financial system, doesn't care what your religion is, it doesn't care what your nationality is, doesn't care what your politics, your gender, your political views, where you're from, what you think. It doesn't care about any of that stuff. It just processes transactions. Every 10 minutes, new blocks come out and nobody cares where that money goes. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. And when we started this conversation, you brought up something that I truly appreciated, which was the work in the history that went into finally giving us Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin leading to everything else that we see and have now. We had attempts at different sort of protocols. Satoshi essentially combined 4 failed attempts into one masterful piece of art. Where has the delineation gone, though? I personally prescribe to the notion that Bitcoin's fundamental benefit over every other asset, whether it's a cryptocurrency, whether it's a stock, an equity, whether it's a fiat currency, is the decentralized nature of it. There's no individual, there's no company, there's no group that's going to turn around and say, all right, nope, it's actually going to be 22. You know what? We're going to make 30 million. Nope.
Yeah.
Keep pumping. Like, there's none of that. Vitalik could turn around tomorrow and say, you know what? E2 scrapping it. Nope. I'm going to do this update instead. So how do we combat that? How do you like measure that risk with these other cryptocurrencies versus Bitcoin?
I think we need to talk about really levels of decentralization. I think too many people look at decentralization as a black and white issue, right? It's either decentralized or it's not decentralized. And it's just simply not the case. There's always points of human failure along any branch of any cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin, right? We have to hope that the developers are able to spot bugs and stuff like this. And that is, for better or worse, a point of potential failure, right? That does have, 10 guys sitting in a room somewhere working on development, right? So it's one of the most decentralized cryptocurrencies, but then we can talk about, for example, how the mining over time has started trending towards massive warehouses. And yes, it's globally decentralized, but it's also now, pushing into a few big mining pools, a few dozen guilds of big miners. So does that mean Bitcoin's not decentralized? No, of course it doesn't. But centralization versus decentralization is just not a clear-cut issue. Now, with some altcoins, for example, it's a pretty clear-cut issue on the levels of not being decentralized. But for something like Ethereum, for example, it's not programmatic, right? And that's, I think, where the biggest criticisms come from the Bitcoin community, that, well, because it's not already all programmed in, it's not decentralized enough. I would say Ethereum's very decentralized, but we do have a core group of developers, not just Vitalik, right? But a core group of developers who do work on initiatives to enhance the protocol moving forward. The network itself, very decentralized with all the different nodes around the world. Those proposals get pushed out, they get voted on, right? So levels of decentralization, again, what we're talking about here. And it really comes down to, I think, the question, if you want to get into the technicalities, is how much decentralization do you need? You see, for my random altcoin that I'm trying to flip, decentralization's not very important, right? I'm hoping that the number is going to go up so I can sell it to, cash out, right? for storing my wealth, which is why Bitcoin, of course, is the number one asset that I own above everything else. It's, the biggest asset that I own, and not just crypto, but if we zoom out, gold, stocks, all that stuff, Bitcoin is my number one by miles, because it's a storage of wealth for me. I feel comfortable leaving a significant proportion of my wealth sitting in Bitcoin in a way that I would never feel comfortable doing, with some low cap altcoin or something like this. So these are the kind of the benefits of decentralization, is it allows me to sleep at night.
I also do appreciate the showing the spectrum of decentralization. I don't think anything in this world is black or white other than the colors black or white. And so that is valid. However, look, Vitalik founded one thing that is truly incredible, truly beautiful, and that is Bitcoin Magazine. He founded something else that a lot of people do use, Ethereum. And I am still a little curious about you, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you still have a good size of your portfolio in Ethereum as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
How or why are you able to sleep at night as calmly with that percentage in Ethereum versus how much you have in Bitcoin?
Because I understand, I think perhaps on a deep enough level, at least for my comfort, what Ethereum is and what Ethereum is trying to build and where Ethereum is going. And, it's a different, for me, I look at it as a different investment thesis versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the digital gold in my portfolio, is the store of value in my portfolio. I look at Ethereum as being more akin to a tech stock, right? But it's a tech stock that captures a very broad swath of what is happening in the entire crypto space, right? It's almost like a crypto index fund, if you will. Do you want exposure to the success of oracles in crypto? Buy Ethereum. Do you want exposure to NFTs? Buy Ethereum. Do you want exposure to decentralized finance? Buy Ethereum. Do you want exposure to the growth of stablecoins? Buy Ethereum. Do you want exposure to, the growth of random altcoin number 500? Probably buy Ethereum, because it's probably built on Ethereum. That's where we still, the most projects still being built is, of course, over on Ethereum. So I look at it like that. It's, I think it's an incredible asset. Are there areas of, criticism? Absolutely. The gas fees right now are crazy. It's become basically unusable for the average person. I think right now, with the state of the market, the gas fees have actually come down to, vaguely human usable levels. But once things kick off again, you're going to be paying hundreds of dollars to use Uniswap, which is completely unacceptable. We do have layer twos taking off on Ethereum. In fact, I think we've seen a huge amount of innovation on the layer two space in Ethereum, right? So I know, obviously, Bitcoin layer two is there. The Lightning Network is very important. We've seen other innovations at the layer two level with some different DeFi protocols, for example, playing around on Bitcoin layer two. But we see a huge amount of brain power and innovation going on Ethereum because of its more experimental network, right? Because of its the sort of more open attitude towards development and stuff like this. And that, again, if we talk about that conservative nature of Bitcoin and Bitcoin development, it took us how many years to get SegWit? It took us how many years to get Taproot, et cetera, et cetera. That's a feature, not a bug, right? Again, we need to move slowly with Bitcoin and make sure that everything works perfectly, which is one of the reasons why we don't have all this crazy stuff happening, because, again, Bitcoin store value, digital gold, all that fun kind of stuff. They're just fundamentally different assets. And to try to say, well, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're just the same thing, or, it's just basically the same thing. So this one's got, smart contracts and it's, slightly less decentralized than Bitcoin, really misses the forest from trees, so to speak, when we talk about what these different assets are and what the investment thesis behind those different assets is.
I gotta say, man, I want to hate what you're saying, but I don't. I prescribe to, and correct me if I'm wrong. I want to essentially re-say what your argument is in the way that I have digested it. My big push on Bitcoin, when someone asks me about what's it really worth? My argument always goes back to, well, there's too much money in it now. And it's not just too much money from me or my friends or my dad or whatever. It's too much money from Wall Street, too much money from people who don't want to lose money. And as a result, that to me makes it feel like a safe, sound store of value. to your point, there is nothing, there are things, but nothing beyond really the Lightning Network on layer 2 that is a consistent use and consistently in the zeitgeist for Bitcoin. Now, flipping that over to the Ethereum argument that you made, where it's more of a tech stock, in the same vein where I say, well, there's too much money in Bitcoin for it to ever go to zero. There's too much, what you're essentially saying is there's too much built on top of Ethereum for it to go to zero. It may whip around and whatnot, but beyond that as well, you also are coupling that argument where there's too much built on top of it for it to go to zero with the age-old argument that I fucking love, the old picks and shovels, where the gold miners back in the 1848, 1849, all over California, coming over here to try to get rich mining gold. Well, none of them really became rich. The people who became rich were the people who sold them all of the equipment to get to go and mine for gold. Same with Ethereum. They're not going to, we're not, or I'm not, I did not say we. They are not saying you're going to get rich on some DeFi token or whatever, or you're going to get rich with this NFT. It's, hey, you need this to access that, but also like, if you just have this, you technically are touching that and that and that.
Yeah.
So I actually don't hate that argument as much as I want to. I will.
If I could just add, if I can add one thing into about the money that behind Ethereum, in a similar vein to your thought on, well, there's so much money behind Bitcoin, it can't fail, right? I would say a very similar thing at this point with Ethereum. To be honest, we've got Bitcoin ETFs. Guess what? Basically, the only other asset with an ETF product is Ethereum, right? Look at Coinbase. Look at the volumes that they're doing on Coinbase. We've had multiple quarters now where Ethereum is doing more volume on Coinbase than Bitcoin, right? And as we know, Coinbase is a major destination for institutional buyers. So we have seen the institutional interest coming out. Cathie Wood has now added Ethereum to her portfolio for ARK Invest, right? They're doing 60% Bitcoin, 40% Ethereum, which is one of the things that I kind of say from time to time to people. If you are busy and you don't have time to go chasing, all the random altcoins in the altcoin forest, you don't have the risk appetite for it, importantly, obviously, because a lot of these coins do, collapse horrifically. Some of them pump 100x, all that stuff, you got to take profits, et cetera, et cetera. If you just want to keep it simple and you want to get exposure to the best of the crypto space, look at what Cathie Wood did. 60% Bitcoin, 40% Ethereum. That way you get access to the best hard money on the planet. You get that digital gold, you get the cryptocurrency that's most secure and not going anywhere. And you can also get access to basically the rest of the crypto market. Everything else going on, that's built on Ethereum, right? So if you're a busy investor, you can just buy Bitcoin. But if you're a busy investor who wants a little bit of something extra, just buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those are the only two cryptocurrencies an investor would essentially need. And I got way more coins than that, obviously, but those are the only two that an investor who's busy, doesn't have time to look into all this stuff, but they want broad access to the cryptocurrency space. I mean, those two coins together make up about 60% of the entire market cap of crypto. And if we take what is built on top of Ethereum, we're looking at like 75% of the entire cryptocurrency market. It's absolutely wild.
So I want to push back on one of the points you made in regards to Coinbase. As someone who had invested in Coinbase, I still think I own a few shares here or there. Yes, their quarterly reports have shown an influx of Ethereum. However, I would challenge that point in saying that tried and true Bitcoiners don't go to Coinbase to buy their Bitcoin. I myself do not. I haven't in some time. I think the last time I did make a purchase on Coinbase was about a year and a half ago. And it was only because it was such a large purchase that my fees on Cash App were going to be astronomical versus my fees on Coinbase. So with that kind of knowledge, and then doubling down with the fact that right now we only have Coinbase in the publicly traded markets, do you worry that, hey, should a Binance all of a sudden enter the publicly traded market? Should Swan go public or Strike turn into a publicly traded company? Does that change sort of the metrics of what Wall Street is looking at as far as Bitcoin and Ethereum or crypto at large exposure?
I mean, potentially. I mean, obviously, I think one of the reasons why we see U.S. institutional players going to Coinbase is because of the established reputation of the company, right? And I remember a very interesting statistic from Coinbase that only 25% of the people who buy crypto on Coinbase are Bitcoin only investors, right? So the other 75% of people get into the altcoin forest, right? Whether that be they just buy Bitcoin and Ethereum, or they're, down there buying Dogecoin. I don't know what coin number 500 on CoinMarketCap is today, but I'm bashing the crap out of it. But that coin as well, so we see that, but you have to remember, so maybe the OG Bitcoin community isn't really buying Bitcoin on Coinbase because the fees do suck. Let's keep it real. Coinbase, they charge about 5 times the fees, so if you're using their card purchase service, the fees are absurd. If you're using their proper exchange with Coinbase Prime, is it, or Pro, Coinbase Pro? If you're using Coinbase Pro, it's still like 5 times the fees of Binance. So yeah, most people, the OGs, the people who take a bit more time, they understand, like, man, there's a lot of lost Satoshis. Why the heck would I buy there when I go buy somewhere else that's got, a fifth of the fees? But just because OG Bitcoiners are not buying there, you have to remember, new Bitcoiners are buying on Coinbase. People who are getting orange pilled, they don't have other options. Like if you're in New York, for example, you got almost no options on where to buy Bitcoin, as an example. So it's a place where new Bitcoiners are being born.
Do you think, though, that that's I personally don't like the idea that new Bitcoiners who are maybe not as well versed about the space, who maybe don't know enough about why Bitcoin even exists in the first place, are then exposed to a plethora of other options. And Coinbase, to their point, does an excellent job with some of their educational content, explaining what this blockchain does, what this token is actually used for. They do an excellent job doing that. I'm not knocking that. I, however, have a hard time telling my friends, go to Coinbase, because it's just, in my opinion, it's too much and it will confuse a lot of people. And as a result, people will eventually say, greed drives everyone's motivations for the most part, whether we want to admit it or not. And if you're going on Coinbase at first, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin. But then all of a sudden you see what's moved the most in the last 24 hours? What's moved the least? For the most part, Bitcoin doesn't really fall on those lists because it's not as volatile as Bitcoin is. It's not even as volatile as some of the DeFis that are offered on Coinbase. And then my second point to that is, and I'm using this statistic not in a literal sense, so don't take my words literally here. However, there has been a consistent theme when a new token is introduced onto Coinbase. Shiba had a big run up, Doge had a big run up, Solana's ripping. Hey, Coinbase, we're offering it now. Come make your next Doge purchase here on Coinbase. And almost consistently, the prices of these tokens, when they're introduced on Coinbase, crashes down. To me, that reads like a nice little pump and dump. The insiders know, hey, we're about to get listed on Coinbase. Let's really beef up our bags. And then boom, we're going to leave everyone else holding the bag. What are your thoughts on this? This could just be my opinion. These are all speculations for the most part.
Coinbase listings do have that history. The reality is that because so many people are simply stuck on Coinbase, when we do get these altcoins listed there, we tend to see big pumps. I think this effect has been going down a bit with time because Coinbase has been listing so many altcoins. But without a doubt, you do see these big exchanges. Same thing happens on Binance, by the way. When a small altcoin gets listed on Binance, the smaller the market cap, the bigger the pump happens as it gets mega bought up. And is there insider information going on? It's crypto, man, probably. It's tricky with these smaller cap coins. The reason they can pump these things so much is simply because the market caps are so low of a lot of this stuff. This is the thing, if a new exchange, not that they would do it, but let's say Swan Bitcoin listed Ethereum, right? And they started selling Ethereum. That's not going to pump Ethereum by like 50% overnight, and people aren't going to come in and dump because there's simply not the volume there because the asset's too big. But if they listed, coin number 500, that could potentially cause that coin to pump, right? As an example. So as a thought there.
No, I appreciate the thought. And I'm messaging our producer. I'm like 95% sure that Swan actually does have an Ethereum option as well on their platform.
Oh, right. I didn't know. I thought that was
Bitcoin no. Service, but yeah. Look, I'm not even 100% sure. I'll be honest. I don't use Swan. I fucking love Jack Mallers. He was here last week on the show. We had a great time with him. I am strike till I die ever since I got off Cash App. So Jack, you're the man, dude. Nice. Talk to us a little bit about sort of what's going on with the SEC regulations. They're getting talked about a lot, Bitcoin is getting clumped into the whole crypto conversation. You know how I feel about that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Obviously, you may not even give a rat's ass about American legislation in regards to crypto, and I understand that, but I do feel like it can have a global impact.
Well, that's exactly the point. But what happens in the US often has a reverberating impact around the financial world, right? They have key positions in most global financial institutions. So when it comes to what the US does on a regulatory level, they have a strong ability to influence a lot of other countries. You know, maybe not the major economies, they might cut their own path, but certainly when it comes to smaller economies, the US can push their financial weight around and say, well, this is what we did, you should consider doing a similar thing. And especially if we were to see any sort of negative regulations come out in particular, that's when the US, I think, would push and, try to limit exchange access or whatever. Not that we have seen any of that kind of stuff happening, but I would say it's a very interesting conversation with the SEC because obviously they've established that Bitcoin is not a security quite a while ago. But the reality of a lot of the altcoins is that they are either dancing on the line of being a security or they're straight up a security, and that's why US exchanges don't list a lot of this stuff. And you got to keep it real with a lot of these altcoins. They're basically crowdfunding for company ideas, right? And that's what you're doing. You're investing in startups where you have absolutely no rights in the company, which is a very risky thing, obviously. A lot of the token models are very much security focused. The promises and the white papers are presented as securities. And so in terms of that, the SEC is not completely wrong on everything that they're talking about, but they're also wrong on a lot of what they're talking about, and they're overreaching, and they're basically making it very difficult for the average US investor in terms of access to products. Because here's the deal. You and I, we want to keep our Bitcoin on our hardware wallet, right? We don't want to leave it sitting. We don't want to have like a spot Bitcoin ETF. I don't know. Would you buy a spot Bitcoin ETF? No, neither would I.
Personally,
but a lot of people would. This is the thing. A lot of people out there are not going to buy real Bitcoin, and that's unfortunate. But that's the reality of the world we live in. Part of all this is actually meeting investors where they are. Right? We can have our hopes and dreams for, well, you should really only buy Bitcoin, but then they start learning about crypto. Like, there's all this other cool stuff. Like, I like gaming, so I'm going to buy gaming coins. I like the idea behind Ethereum, so I'm going to buy Ethereum. I'm interested in the metaverse. Can I find some metaverse coins? And their interests go beyond simply a store of value. A lot of people want to speculate, right? And that's there and available for them. The SEC has been a bad actor on so many levels. It's so funny because you look at, who can invest in token sales, right? And it'll be everybody in the world except North Korea, Cuba, and the United States. Like every time, they're clumped in with those countries, right? And the SEC's made it so the regular investors can't invest in token sales. And, from a very Bitcoin heavy perspective, you might say, wow, they're all going to be scams anyway. Maybe, but, a lot of them aren't. And you should give regular investors the opportunity to invest in it anyway, because the reality is it's all just about keeping the poor poor and the rich rich. I saw the SEC is looking to increase the number of money you need to have as an accredited investor from $1 million to $10 million. So only people with $10 million or more can invest in pre-IPO stocks, token sales, all this stuff. I mean, that's a scam. Give regular people the opportunity. That's essentially, if you boil it down to the core, it's about choices, freedom, and opportunity. That's what Bitcoin was about. And yes, as Bitcoin is the tip of the spear, but as an extension of all that, we have all this stuff happening across the broader crypto market. Let people speculate where they want. Let them do what they want. Let them, invest in token sales, get airdrops. I mean, come on. How many US investors have been screwed by not being able to receive airdrops? It's crazy.
I mean, look, as someone who aspires to be an accredited investor and have my own VC firm, let me tell you, as someone who was not too far away, I was a stone's throw away from that qualification, and I am fucking furious.
I can imagine.
I curse way too much. on this show. But let me tell you, like, the other point, and I'm stealing this from, you know what, fine. I see a lot of these comments and I don't really care about it, but Chamath Palihapitiya brought up an excellent fucking point about this, where you need to open up the accredited investor pool. This is huge, an opportunity for people to make generational wealth by investing early in companies. Yes, it's less than 1 in 10 actually end up making it, let alone 1 in over 100, less than 1% actually become unicorn level companies. I respect and understand that. However, you're telling me I can go now and bet on who's going to win the NBA championship?
Or take all your money down to the corner store and buy lottery tickets, man.
Like,
put it all in black.
Fuck off, SEC. And also, to your point too, are we really surprised that a bunch of lawyers with no real financial background, knowledge, or understanding who are making financial decisions are making the right or wrong decisions? Like, of course they're not. Of course they're making the wrong decisions about all of this stuff. I do want to really quickly just remind everyone watching, Bitcoin 22 in Miami, April 6th through the 9th. It is going to be the bomb. Lark, are you going to be able to make it, or are you going to be stuck, siloed off in my favorite country in the world, low key?
I'll be stuck in New Zealand during that time, but I hope you guys have a great time.
Well, if your prime minister will let me, I hope to spend my summer snowboarding down there for a little bit, but
nice.
Remains to be seen on that front. Let me ask you a little bit. One of my favorite sort of things that happened over the last week, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. You, sir, have made me a lot of money, so thank you, Elon. I have a theory about him, and I think it was confirmed last week, that this dude just doesn't care. He doesn't really care about what goes on in the world, but he really does care about how he's perceived, just enough to allow people to influence him to do decisions such as paying taxes, such as opening up Starlink to Ukraine. What are your thoughts on Elon's just impact on Bitcoin, on Doge, on just the global crypto market right now?
I think one of the interesting things about Elon that not a lot of people maybe always account for, but he is one of the world's biggest influencers, right? I mean, beyond him as a CEO, right? He's an influencer who understands how to influence. And, you know, whether his opinions are swayed by the crowd or whatever else goes on, he's a very savvy marketer, and he understands internet culture. He understands meme culture. He understands new technology. And he's got what, I don't know, tens of millions of followers over on Twitter. He's a big, big influence on markets overall, which is exactly why when Elon tweets about Dogecoin always pumps. You know? So yeah, he's a big powerhouse guy.
I like that argument that he is an influencer more than an entrepreneur or at least to a degree. He has become that. Is there any
playing both roles, right?
He plays both roles very excellently, man. I definitely would have gone and taken an island once I sold PayPal.
He can't help himself, man. He's got to do stuff. He's got that busy mind, right? I can't imagine Elon being the guy who's like, I'm just gonna go lay on the beach. He's like, I got all this money. I can build a rocket company. Let's do it. And I can build a car company. Let's do that. That'll be exciting and fun and give me, you know, somewhere to put all my energy, you know?
No, absolutely, man. I love the hustle and ambition of that man, and I look forward to what he will continue to build. To the point of just influencers and celebrities within Bitcoin and even other cryptos at large. I'm less familiar with those beyond, I don't know, a Shiba Inu literally being, like, in my opinion, the hottest dog to own right now if you're a Doge or Shiba Inu token holder. But Bitcoin, we have our celebrities. We have guys like Michael Saylor and Jack Dorsey really pushing the ball forward. Is there anyone in this on that list of Bitcoin celebrities that you look to and you're like, hey, what they're doing is really influential in pushing the ball forward? And is there one that you're kind of like, yo, take a back seat, like let this other guy push it forward?
Well, I would say that in terms of, I don't know about the backseat guy, but I definitely say in terms of who's got a really positive impact, and I think has been just an incredible advocate for Bitcoin is Michael Saylor, right? I really think that we want to talk about Elon Musk and Tesla buying Bitcoin. That was sweet, right? But how'd that even happen? It's because Michael Saylor did in the first place. And Michael Saylor talked to Elon, got on a call with him probably, and sat down and said, yeah, here's how you can buy Bitcoin for your company. So he's been an incredible advocate in terms of being a big voice in the space out there regularly representing Bitcoin and doing it in an articulate way and doing it in a way that really speaks to a broad audience of people, as well as very specifically, and I think importantly, to the institutional investor crowd, to the corporate crowd. He's just held his second annual, Bitcoin conference thing where he basically step-by-step guide on how a corporation can buy Bitcoin. That stuff matters. That's a massive advocate right there. And so I think he's been doing incredible work. So.
Well, love that. And we are huge fans of Saylor here as well. We're at Bitcoin Magazine. I want to sort of, before we wrap things up with you, I do want to maybe ask you what or why, what led you down the path of other tokens? What took you to the dark side?
The dark side. Well, I don't see it as the dark side necessarily, but what I guess really was interesting for me with things beyond Bitcoin was my interests beyond Bitcoin. I look at Bitcoin as digital gold, great store of value, strong political money, all this stuff, right? But other stuff's cool too. This is just kind of really what it comes down to. Gaming's cool. I like, speculating on gaming coins. Metaverse stuff, that's cool. DeFi, awesome, interesting. I love playing around with it. It's fun to play with. It's fun to farm tokens. Like, I enjoy doing all that stuff. For me, it's just the experimentation, the ability to just play with these different fields of things. It's like with my stock portfolio, right? I don't just invest in gold, right? I also like renewable energy. I like electric vehicles. I like tech stocks, right? So Bitcoin's got a very special place in my portfolio, but I like playing around with other stuff. My interests go beyond just Bitcoin, even though I love Bitcoin. It is the number one coin that I own, but I like other stuff too. And I just want to make one quick point before maybe we finish up here. And you brought it up interesting with the startup failure rates and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the big things that trip people up when they come into the altcoin space. They think that they're investing in established companies, so to speak, right? When they invest in some of these new altcoins, they're like, oh, well, this is going to be like, they're talking about doing this thing. So they must just be like, investing in, one of the big gaming company stocks or something like that. It's nothing like that at all. It's super speculative. The failure rate in crypto for altcoins, it's, 90%. It's similar to the startup world, and you are investing in startups. So you have to take that mentality. This is a startup. There is a high chance of failure. And I think that's what probably trips up so many people who invest in altcoins. They really don't understand that a lot of these coins are going to fail, but then you're going to have the unicorns. You're going to have the ones that go absolutely crazy and provide big returns. So it's trying to find the needle in the haystack, so to speak. But if you don't have time to find the needle in the haystack and to deal with all the drama, just buy Bitcoin. Keep your life simple. It's gonna go to $1 million, guys. So you can just buy it and chill.
You heard it here, guys. Crypto Lark even telling you, just buy Bitcoin. Just stack sats every day.
And chill. Stack sats and chill, man. Used to be a way of life around here in crypto land, man. Now everyone's just, chasing dog coins.
Everyone needs to just take a deep breath and chill. I also get a little bit of flack sometimes. Like I came up as a stock investor, just like on the side. I would have my 9-to-5 job that was longer than 9-to-5, but I would still be investing in stocks at the same time. And that's sort of what led me down this path of Bitcoin. I definitely get some flack for it from time to time when I'm not 100% in Bitcoin, but when you lose everything being 100% in something, you can never make the same mistake twice, as I like to say. So Lark, I want to give you the opportunity to let our people who maybe aren't as familiar with you know where they can find more information about you.
The best place probably to come over and find me on either Twitter or YouTube. I'm posting videos all the time on YouTube and, sharing my thoughts about Bitcoin, the wider crypto market, the macro scene, all that fun stuff over on Twitter as well. So come find me there and, you can hear some more of my thoughts. Be happy to see you there.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to have to bother you to have you come back so we can continue some discussions, maybe over some charts and really dive into some of these equity side of things, since I think we can have a lot of fun dissecting some of these ETFs that are going to be coming out over the next few months as well.
Sounds like fun.
Awesome, Lark. I will let you get back to it, man. Be safe out in New Zealand.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Bye.
All right, guys, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then Chris and I are going to wrap things up for today's stream. What is up, gang? Thank you for sticking around all day with me. I hope it's been fun. We've had a busy, jam-packed episode today. I see a lot of you were not pleased with Lark. However, I think the conversation with Lark was actually really great. The dude is a Bitcoiner. He just also invests in other things. Whether or not you agree with the strategy of being all in on Bitcoin or not, that is your own prerogative. What someone else does with their money is their business and their choice. If they choose to educate or help other people, that's fine. If they're shilling shit coins, that's a whole other story. If you actually go and watch some of that dude's videos, he talks about Bitcoin for a good majority of the time, as do most of the people that we have had on this segment. So I urge you to listen to the words being spoken without judging it before listening. That said, if you really can't stand any other tokens and all you care about is Bitcoin, then the only place you need to be in April is Miami, April 6th to the 9th. It is the Bitcoin conference. It is the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world. Honestly, I'm going to call you a phony, a big fat phony if you don't show up. If you're a Bitcoiner and you're not there without a legitimate excuse, I want a note from your doctor or whoever is going to give you a note, maybe a note from your mom, because you probably still live in your mom's basement if you're not showing up to Bitcoin 22. Use code YTMAG, get 10% off. I'm really hyped for Industry Day. As I've said tons of time on this show, I went to the conference last year without a job in Bitcoin, with the pure desire of trying to land a job in this industry. And here I am talking to you guys, working over at Bitcoin Magazine. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button as well. When we hit 69,000 subscribers, we are going to make it rain sats. Chris, can we throw sats in the chat for anyone who's lingering at this point? I see 51 of you guys are still here watching now. So we're going to go ahead and throw one last carrot code into the chat. And also for those who maybe don't really care about the conference, maybe you can't take off work Monday through Friday. I get it. Show up for Sound Money Fest, a one-day music festival. Every single artist that's performing was paid in Bitcoin. Every single artist performing is a Bitcoiner. We are going to rage our fucking asses off at Sound Money Fest. David Bailey, if you're watching, yes, I'm working that day. For everyone else who's watching, no, we're going to party our asses off at Sound Money Fest. Use code YTMAG. You can still get 10% off. You can buy a ticket just to Sound Money Fest as well. We're really excited about that. There'll be a comedy stage in addition to the two music stages, one for house music and one for just about everything else. You'll find me flip-flopping between both. And as always, if y'all find me at Bitcoin 22, say what's up and we'll roll up a joint. Thank you guys for tuning in today. It was an absolute blast. As always, find us on Twitter, find us and ask us any questions that you may have. And we'll be back next week with some exciting episodes.